The greatest conflict in hero history has reached its breaking point, as heroes and villains clash in a war that will decide the future of society itself. Deku now stands at the edge of his destiny, wielding the combined strength of generations, while Shigaraki rises as the ultimate embodiment of chaos and destruction. Even All Might, stripped of his quirk, refuses to back down, donning his iron armor to confront his eternal rival one last time.
Genius.
Bonds will be tested, sacrifices will be made, and the unshakable resolve of the next generation will determine whether hope or despair will shape the world to come. This is the final battle between One for All and All for One. Let's get started. Right after All Might and Midoriya sensed the intensity of their respective duels, All for One once again unleashed his previous quirk, Mixed Combo Blast Attack, against All Might, destroying a large portion of various buildings. All Might thought that perhaps All for One was starting to get bored with the one-sided struggle of their battle. So, to make sure All for One stayed interested in him, he boosted his speed and mobility using the Hercules version of Shoji and Froppy's quirks, Tentacle and Froppy suction pads, on his two limbs. On his other two limbs, All Might used the quirks of Todoroki and Ojuro while thinking of how he could set up a trap. While assuming that the damage All for One had taken truly shortened his lifespan, All Might also thought of the right quirk he should use to quickly achieve victory in their duel. And while coughing up blood again, he realized his only problem in executing his plan was the lack of a power source. So he called for help from Anima, who immediately responded. While All Might was in motion in the middle of an alley, All for One suddenly appeared right in front of him, saying how quickly All Might shifted from laughing like a crazy old man to becoming a coward desperately fleeing. All Might was shocked, and right away he also saw the next attack All for One was about to launch at him. Black matter emerged from All for One's fingers and burrowed into the walls of the surrounding buildings. All for One said that he knew All Might's goal, so he didn't need to waste excess strength just to twist All Might's smile into an agonized grimace. According to All for One, Power Saver mode was already enough for him to kill All Might. And then, black matter burst out from both sides of the buildings, hardened, and pierced through All Might's Hercules armor and body. But All Might still managed to quickly boost upward to escape and get out of the alley without being pinned down by All for One. However, before he could get far, he was suddenly blocked and caught between two monstrous quirk combo mouths born from All for One's Demon Lord manifestation. Their size was now enormous compared to when he used them against Endeavor and Mount Lady. This forced All Might to descend, and in his anger he shouted at All for One, calling him a liar. With a creepy smile, All for One replied that he really was conserving his power. Next came a cat-and-mouse chase between All Might and the two giant mouths chasing after him. All for One insulted him, asking where his smile had gone, since he was nothing but a bag of bones missing half his guts. According to All for One, All Might was just a foolish old man trying to provide himself with last-minute care before death, relying on worthless, unoriginal quirk copies taken from children. Then, using his tentacle-like quirk combo, All for One destroyed the octopus-like limbs of All Might's Hercules armor. As their cat-and-mouse chase continued, All for One told All Might that he should keep smiling because they were still on camera, being watched by the entire world. People would only witness their symbol of peace descend into a symbol of impotence. After that, All for One once again disappeared from behind All Might, as he had actually taken a quick detour to surprise him by bursting out of the right side building wall. As All for One emerged, he immediately struck All Might hard on the left hip, landing a solid hit. In the next scene, we see All Might naked and bowing down inside the dark and stormy One for All dimension. Returning to the real world, it turned out All Might had already coiled a mechanical tentacle around All for One's entire right arm to trap him and prevent him from escaping the explosive punch of his right fist. Then, with full heart, All Might explained to All for One that he still did not understand that lights tend to flicker on and off. So even if All Might's light were snuffed out, someone else would surely pick up the torch he left behind and continue to shine. From the sky, 3 objects were approaching. But before we could find out what they were, we shifted first to Gunga Mountain Villa, where we saw Aoyama still struggling, desperately trying to use his quirk to fight the plant-controlling villain even though he had already been captured and crucified by the plants. 300 meters northeast of the ground zero of the Divide and Conquer operation, there were 32 heroes tasked with securing the area from villains who had not been warped away. But all those heroes except one had already been wiped out. Aoyama was among those wiped out, and even though he was still conscious, he could no longer move because of the plants binding his body. The villain, Kaneda, explained that human flesh was all his seedlings needed to thrive. Even Fat Gum could not move anymore because the slow burrowing of the seedling's roots had already reached deep inside his body. He said that because of that, even his fat absorption was useless. So he just looked at Aoyama and told him to show them what he was made of. Aoyama had no words to say. Meanwhile, Kaneda was enjoying himself watching his largest flower on record. Suddenly, the entire body and bud of the largest flower, which resembled a poison ivy monster, began to shake. Then countless monster flowers suddenly enraged. Kaneda explained that after just one bloom, one of his flowers could already spread countless pollen grains capable of propagating like a daisy chain. Through their roots, these flowers were veritable extensions of himself. Then, one monster flower grabbed Aoyama's belt and carried it to Kaneda, who called Aoyama a traitor. He could no longer escape, especially since his belt, which his quirk needed to aim, was gone. According to Kaneda, Aoyama was only feeding the flowers further with his desperate straining. Then he insulted Aoyama, saying his life was nothing but a pathetic, shameful existence, as he had been nothing more than a pawn who accepted a quirk ill-suited to his body. Because of those words, Aoyama had a flashback of how happy he and his parents were on the day he received his belt. Suddenly, Aoyama spoke. He answered Kaneda, saying that was precisely the reason why he had earlier said the word merci, which means thank you in French. Kaneda wondered if Aoyama had truly said that earlier. Aoyama explained that reminding himself of his shameful life was exactly what spurred him to follow in the wake of the light carried by his classmates. That was what gave him the desire to shine from deep down within his core. As he said this, a powerful laser was already accumulating in Aoyama's stomach. After gathering power, he released it aimlessly, scattering blasts toward Kaneda and his hundreds of flower monsters. Aoyama's attack was incredibly bright and powerful, but not a single laser blast landed on the enemy to deal real damage. The blasts only passed behind Kaneda, who then told Aoyama that chasing after something beyond his sight would only lead him to an equally shameful death. But as we heard All Might shouting, "Let there be light in the darkness," we simultaneously saw the grit and courage on Aoyama's face. He ignored the bleeding wounds on his cheeks caused by the sprouting flowers. What Kaneda did not know was that right behind him was Hagakure, collecting and absorbing the light beams released by Aoyama. Apparently, Hagakure was the sole remaining hero of the 32 at Gunga Mountain Villa who had not yet been wiped out. Alongside the image of All Might inside the one-for-all dimension, we also heard Aoyama shouting that he wanted to twinkle like his classmates too. At the same time, this was when Hercules had already sent out 2 enemy units connected to the power substation. These 2 units were now flying while carrying an extremely long electrical wire. Hagakure commended Aoyama as a hero. Using warp refraction naval laser, Hagakure redirected Aoyama's laser toward Kaneda, striking him directly in the back. Aoyama was also caught in the attack since he was within the area of effect of his and Hagakure's powerful combined strike. Returning to the battle between All Might and All for One, we saw that the objects descending from the sky were actually part of the advanced support gear of Hercules' All Might. So All Might told All for One that he had not fought him only to lose. Laughing, he told All for One to learn the name of the attack that would burn him away, and its name was Can't Stop Twinkling. Then the motor from above fired a powerful naval laser downward directly at their location. We first returned to Gunga Mountain Villa, where we see Aoyama injured and smoking as well from taking his own naval laser that was refracted by Hagakure. He asks her if it is really her he is seeing in front of him now. Hagakure is left speechless by Aoyama's question, her eyes widening in shock and confusion. We also see that they have successfully defeated and apprehended Kaneda, who is likewise smoking from the heat of the naval laser that struck his back. And Hagakure herself is now on top of Kaneda, and, for some reason, her originally invisible body has become semi-visible. She isn't even wearing any clothes. Because of her confusion, she looked closely at her hand to inspect if it had become visible. Then she raised both hands to check her body. Next, she quickly lowered her hands and began to grow flustered. She screamed loudly, blushed intensely, covered her chest, and shouted at Aoyama to look away. Aoyama also suddenly realized his mistake, shouted in surprise, and looked away as well, while Hagakure ran behind the nearest tree to hide. Hagakure could not accept what had happened because it violated her very identity as an invisible girl. Aoyama apologized and explained that he was only on the verge of death, which was why he reacted that way earlier. Hagakure thought deeply about how her invisibility had lessened from using her quirk, but she realized that Aoyama's facing his imminent death might have boosted his quirk beyond its usual capacity, which in turn bugged out her invisibility quirk during refraction. With admiration and wonder in her eyes, Hagakure remarked that Aoyama's quirk had evolved. Aoyama did not react with happiness. Instead, he responded that what mattered more was that he and Hagakure should burn away Kanita's plants to save the heroes' lives. He remembered what Fat Gum had said earlier about the plant's ability to continue feeding and growing even after their master was defeated, that they would not vanish even without will. So he asked Hagakure if she could adjust the strength of her light to burn the roots of the plants digging into the hero's flesh. Hagakure answered that she could, but asked if Aoyama's tummy could handle the task. Aoyama replied that this day was his very last as a student of their academy, so he would do everything to save their allies. Now we return to the battle between All Might and All for One, where the engines of Unit 1 naval laser began to overheat and its battery started to fail even as it continued forcing out the naval laser. All Might did not allow it to stop or even weaken slightly, because he knew All for One would escape the line of fire if that happened. So Unit 1 kept firing directly, drawing energy from Hercules to pin All for One down. We see All Might standing at the front of the strike zone, close to All for One. According to him, he had taken a cue from Star's quirk last stand. All Might had planned to copy Star's strategy of turning the laser into solid matter to boost its continuous oomph even more, but that trick was not part of his repertoire. So while we see All for One inside the line of fire, continuously pinned down and crushed by the naval laser, All Might decided to activate and use the Hercules equipment installed in the chest of his armor. This equipment was the equivalent quirk of Jiro, emitting earphone jack's sound wave vibration. All Might used it to give his all in pushing All for One backward, forcing him to remain in the strike zone. In a brief flashback, we see what happened earlier at the end of the cat and mouse chase. All Might managed to purge the tentacle parts of his armor so he could zip away with full power thrusters as the naval laser beam descended toward him and All for One. Using a special optic resin that imitated Hagakure's invisibility quirk, he gained shielding from the heat carried by the naval laser. According to All Might, he had deliberately prepared to take a hit from All for One just to engineer this trap, though he managed to guard the blow using Tailman's equivalent quirk. However, All Might admitted that both his legs had been completely destroyed. With a wide grin on his face, All Might knew that All for One's rage toward him was so great that he avoided punching him in the face, driven by a desire to see him lose his smile. Then four thick tentacle-like dark appendages suddenly burst from All for One's body to attack All Might. They struck his two arms and even his forehead, but All Might's smile remained. Next, he used Yaoyorozu's equivalent quirk in his morphing armor while telling himself that he knew he could no longer load more power into what he had left. So he morphed 2 binding rounds grape juice, the equivalent of Mineta's quirk, and threw one at each of All for One's arms to bind him to the ground. In his mind, All Might shouted that All for One must fade away, while he still could not feel his body's pain because of the euphoria overflowing in him now. Hercules' cameras captured everything happening in their fight, so it could be televised worldwide. In a house somewhere in the world, we see an old box-type television being watched by a child and his grandmother as they follow the battle. The child asked who the skinny man in black was. The grandmother said she didn't know much about heroes, so she didn't know. The grandchild then asked what would happen if the skinny one won, and what if he lost. The grandmother replied that the fight was happening far away, so whatever happened would not really affect them much. The child thought deeply about what his grandmother said, But as he watched the grit shown by the skinny guy on television, he was moved, believing his grandmother might be wrong, and he even clasped his hands as if praying to God. When we returned to the fight, we saw that the naval laser from Unit 1 had begun to thin out, and then it exploded from severe overheating and battery failure. All Might looked up to the sky with worry on his face, and because of this, the thick smoke around the strike zone began to clear. We could now see the destruction of the 2 buildings that had surrounded the line of fire earlier. All Might also began to feel the pain throughout his entire body. Beyond that, he had already used all the equipment and equivalent quirks of his students that he could, and from the main point of impact of the naval laser, we saw an unusual light resonating within the area's thick smoke. After this, All for One emerged from the smoke, crawling forward like a baby. His body was glowing with intense brightness and venting heavy steam. He repeated to All Might what he had said earlier, that tools could not surpass their own limits. All Might was utterly shocked to see All for One's whole body glowing, especially since he was now nothing but a little boy. But All for One continued fighting, released a quirk combo from his shoulder, and asked All Might if he had already forgotten how to smile. Then All for One suddenly stopped moving, as if someone had possessed him. All Might wondered at what had happened, while All for One panicked inwardly because he truly could not move. All Might immediately seized the opportunity and charged forward, and as he did, he suddenly remembered Stain asking him who he really was. So he looked up and saw Stain flying on a hoverboard. Stain even said, "All bleed red," and All Might's smile returned, while Stain once more licked All for One's splattered blood from a piece of rubble he held. Then he threw it while shouting, "Now conquer him," and those super emotional words were meant for All Might alone. The intensity in Stain's eyes and the passion he displayed here, riding the hoverboard, were overwhelming. All for One still could not move and was growing extremely irritated with his situation, but he managed to look upward and realized that Stain was also charging toward him from the sky. According to Stain, he only needed to follow the trail of destruction to reach All for One's location, based on information from Ingenium and Dobby. After that, he simply had to collect a bloodstain that was safe from rain and wind. The problem was that the blood he found might have belonged either to All for One or to All Might. Fortunately, even though his nose had been mutilated, it was still sensitive enough to identify whose blood it was by smell alone. He already knew All Might's blood scent from their last encounter, and because of that he knew this blood did not belong to All Might. Back in the present, as the two charged toward All for One, Stain asked All Might if he understood why he dared to leave the shadows and expose himself. This made All Might recall their last conversation, where Stain told him that a man could only truly be called a hero as long as his soul burned with service for others. Even if a god fell, collapsed to the ground, and his divine soul weakened and became mortal, there was no doubt he still had the right to cling with all desperation to his life. Because of this, All Might shouted his answer back to Stain, declaring that yes, he understood. All Might also remembered Stain's challenge for him to pursue him as the man who had killed 40 heroes. And now Stain shouted that he was here because All Might had to live. At the moment he was about to behead All for One with his katana, blood suddenly burst out from All for One's body, starting from his eyes and ears. Using forcible quirk activation, Bloodlet, all of All for One's blood exploded outward, and the pressure of it stopped the charge of Stain and All Might, who were swept back by the flood of blood. The two could not believe that All for One had managed to pull this off, and that he still had such a move left. Surrounded by blood, All for One shouted Stain's name, Akaguro, and explained that he had already sensed Stain was preparing a move of his own. That was why he was sure his reserve quirk would come in handy. He had prepared this ever since the day he escaped Tartarus, when he saw Stain reject the release of the criminals and the uprising of All for One. Stain said that blood was still blood even after it left the body, but he was suddenly struck by an attack from All for One's Demon Mouth quirk combo, as All for One mocked him, calling him a fool. With blood still pouring heavily from his face, All for One performed antigen swap and explained that he could override his own blood type, and that this was one of the long-held secrets of his rule. Of course, he never left behind anything that could trace back to him from the countless crimes he had committed. As Stain writhed in pain, All for One told him that by removing his own blood, vitality had returned to each of his steps. All Might shouted in alarm and rushed to try to reach Stain to help him. But All for One hurled Stain with such force that he crashed through multiple buildings before smashing into a high floor of one building. All for One immediately flew at great speed towards Stain, while All Might was filled with worry as he suddenly fell behind. Stain lay collapsed among rubble in the hole of the game center building where he had crashed, and All for One quickly approached him, saying he would now take his quirk, Blood Curdle. All Might flew desperately towards Stain, who was somehow still conscious and could hear clearly what All for One was saying to him. Thinking back, All for One understood that Stain had indeed contributed greatly to the grooming of Tomura Shigaraki. But, according to All for One, that was where his role ended, and he began his charge. All Might cried out AFO as he still tried to reach them. Stain answered even though it was hard for him to speak. He said that his role did not end there, because everything he had done from the start was part of one long process. In Stain's mind, he said that higher education had never given him any benefit. Only All Might himself had truly taught him what it meant to be a real hero. So Stain raised his hands to offer his life for All Might's victory. To Stain, All Might was his everything. That was the flood of emotion he carried while All for One attacked him and began stealing his quirk. By the time All Might reached them, All for One had already turned with a smirk to counter him. He charged a strong Demon Lord blast in his free hand, but before he could fire it at All Might, the main unit of Hercules suddenly arrived to shield and protect All Might from the incoming blast. All Might was utterly shocked by this, realizing Hercules was not yet completely scrapped. Hercules said this was his one final shield to give to All Might. And as All for One fired his Demon Lord blast, Hercules told All Might, "You must live on." It seemed All for One had been wrong earlier, because tools could indeed go beyond their limit. Hercules was obliterated into ashes to protect All Might. Then an inner voice spoke inside All Might, telling him, "You can do it." Exhausted and heavily damaged, All Might was still conscious and still heard the voice of his master, Nana. She told him that his tale was still being written and that he could still do what he needed to do. All Might did not respond, thinking he was hallucinating and only pep-talking himself. Then Night Eye appeared before him and told him that all of his support items were used up and his legs were useless, so he could no longer continue fighting. But All Might still forced himself to crawl as Night Eye told him. "However, you are not dead yet." With a smile and burning grit, All Might said, "Do your worst." We also saw the coffin in the sky gradually falling from above, and we also saw All for One drawing closer to its location, as well as to the very place where Midoriya and Shigaraki were fighting. This meant All for One was now within range to use his Gloop Warp. At this time, the villain Dabi had finally been restrained thanks to the efforts of Todoroki and his family. This event was immediately followed by Uraraka in neutralizing the threat posed by Himiko Toga. It was Toga's millions of clones that caused the collapse of the coffin in the sky's integrity, but it was also saved because the twice clones of Sadman's parade began to vanish. Inside the underground facility of the coffin in the sky, we saw Yaoyorozu struggling alone, fighting with self-made weapons and armor to protect Hatsume, who was busy with repairs. Yaoyorozu was filled with relief to see the countless clones charging at her finally disappear. Her body was already full of wounds, scars, and bruises from the hardships of the battle she endured, but the important thing was that the coffin in the sky could now remain airborne thanks to the vanished excess weight. At that exact moment, All for One had closed in within Gloop Warp range of Shigaraki, who was still locked in his struggle against Midoriya. According to Tsukauchi, ever since Midoriya had begun his fight with Shigaraki, he had managed to avoid all of Shigaraki's point-blank attacks. That was why until now their duel was still at a stalemate. This was Gloop Warp, which All for One often used for limited-range teleportation. The spot where he was now standing was the very destination he had intended ever since he injected himself with the rewind shot. It was here that he planned to give Shigaraki the duplicate copy of his quirk, so that Shigaraki's new version could surpass the current All for One. Recognizing the urgency of the dire situation, All Might taunted All for One again to draw his attention. All for One intended to use Gloop Warp to transfer his quirk to Shigaraki without being hindered by Midoriya and One for All. But at the moment he called out to Shigaraki and tried to use Gloop Warp, Shigaraki suddenly clenched his mouth shut with force to block the teleportation. He even told All for One telepathically not to interfere. All for One was disappointed at this and thought that perhaps the other consciousness inside Shigaraki had already been swallowed up. But then he gave a sinister smile as he looked at All Might, saying that he himself simply needed to do the legwork. Meanwhile, from one side of the coffin in the sky, 2 business class students were documenting the battle, and they turned pale when they saw and captured on a phone camera a horrifying sight. All for One was flying towards Shigaraki while carrying All Might by the thigh, who was nearly unconscious. All for One was pleased and told All Might to keep that pathetic look on his face and take responsibility for all the worthless dreams he had given to the children. Meanwhile, as Shigaraki struggled in his fight with Midoriya, he told Midoriya that he better go save All Might. Then Shigaraki also mentioned that this would be the perfect situation because he could now go back to the team of heroes who had repeatedly hurt him earlier inside the coffin in the sky. He would finally get his revenge on them by destroying them all. And as Shigaraki said this, Midoriya suddenly saw the sight of All Might being carried by All for One. He remembered the time when All Might had just passed One for All on to him. Because of that, against his will, he once again became teary-eyed. He also remembered that All Might had told him before to stop being a crybaby if he wanted to become a good apprentice. At that moment, Midoriya felt the One for All vestige representing All Might begin to signal its departure in advance from within him. So he shouted All Might's name at the top of his lungs with overwhelming emotion. Next, he recalled All Might's answer of yes when he had asked if a quirkless person could still become a hero. And All Might's reason had been that he could never abandon his own dream, just as Midoriya himself could not give up on his own. In that emotional moment, All Might suddenly regained strength and managed to wrap both of his arms, still equipped with Hercules bracers, around the back of All for One's neck. He did this to stand firm as the symbol of peace. Then light began to shine between him and All for One, radiating from the 2 bracers preparing to detonate. At this moment, All Might had a flashback where he remembered his master Nana telling Gran Torino to take care of All Might for her. Gran Torino himself had pushed All Might away while Nana told him to help All Might fulfill his dream of becoming the symbol of peace. All Might cried out for his master as he watched from afar while she faced All for One alone, who was using countless quirks and spreading destruction everywhere. At the same time, All for One experienced the very same flashback All Might just had. He found himself wondering why he suddenly remembered it now. According to All for One, Nana had been a fool of a woman because she prioritized her ideals over backing up her words with enough power. That only made her death pathetic, he said. But what he really remembered was Nana telling him that she had no doubt All Might would one day bring him down. All for One's eyes widened at that memory as he witnessed firsthand All Might's willingness to sacrifice himself in detonating the Hercules bracers. All Might was even more unhinged than he is. We then saw All Might still smiling as he asked All for One if he thought he would become a kindergartner again after dying here. And then the Hercules bracers began to detonate. At this moment, All Might had a flashback to his childhood. He was reading a children's superhero comic about Ant-Man, and here All Might read aloud the questions of the protagonist to himself. Why was he created, and what was he supposed to do here? According to All Might, he only had a normal childhood with his mother. He might not even have a proper origin to speak of, because his early memories were too tender and mild. As for whatever All Might had achieved, it just so happened that he glanced back at the path he had taken, and what he saw looked like truly significant things. Along his path he had left behind many balls of light, and one of them was bigger and twinkled more brightly than the others. This was the reason All Might had continued to remain firm in pursuing his dream. Back in the real world, we then saw All for One grinning widely as he mocked All Might's heroism. At the same time, he had already sprouted spikes from his back and shoulders to destroy All Might's Hercules braces. They pierced through All Might's arms and prevented the detonation of the braces. All for One then asked All Might if he had truly dreamed of choosing how he would leave this world. He denied All Might that choice, right up to the very last trick in his book. Next, he grabbed All Might by the throat and used Stain's quirk, Blood Curdle. All Might stiffened from it and could no longer move. All for One told him that a cornered hero was indeed terrifying, and for that lesson, he thanked All Might. He also declared that All Might would achieve nothing here. Then, from the joy of seeing All Might's face lose its cheer and smile, All for One grinned even more intensely. The force of his muscle fibers stretching to grin tore his cheeks apart, giving him a Joker-like smile. With an extremely sinister voice, he described what he saw on All Might's face now, saying he was at his very lowest. Tsukauchi was filled with dread and worry at what he saw happening to All Might. Underneath the coffin in the sky, we saw that gentle criminal learned from La Brava that the flying fortress had stabilized and he should leave, but the coffin in the sky was suddenly struck by a piercing lightning zap right in its center, causing severe internal damage. The business class students continued documenting the events, while gentle criminal once again struggled to support the weight of the coffin in the sky. That zap had come from All for One, who said he had been distracted by the academy, and so his aim had been thrown off. But he let his target, gentle criminal, be crushed under the weight of his righteousness. Next, 2 fighter jets that had once supported Star arrived, and with vengeance they charged in quickly, ready to fire lasers at All for One. One pilot worried that if they fired, they would hit All Might as well. The other understood, but knew that even Star herself had looked up to All Might. Timothy watched anxiously from America, hoping the 2 X-66 jets could contribute. All for One suddenly glared viciously at the incoming jets because he knew they were the ones who had helped Star damage Shigaraki's body. Because of the hesitation shown by the pilots, before they could even fire their lasers, the 2 jets were instantly split in half by All for One. He mocked them, saying Star was no longer around. Timothy was devastated and overwhelmed with grief as he saw what happened to his pilots. Meanwhile, as Shigaraki and Midoriya fought, Midoriya felt an unbearable heaviness in his chest upon seeing All Might's condition. With the failure of the fighter jets, All Might was left in a hopeless situation. The worry was plain on Tsukauchi's face, and not just his. Every concerned citizen watching felt the same. All for One lifted All Might's body into the air, laughing as he prepared to kill him by snapping his back. Everyone watching was overcome with fear and prayed desperately for someone to save All Might. Melissa and Gran Torino could not stop themselves from crying in sorrow and fear. Whatever happened, All Might's death would mark the end of an era. Midoriya and Tsukauchi panicked severely as they realized All Might was about to be killed by All for One. All for One began pulling All Might's body to tear his torso in half. Midoriya could still do nothing because he was occupied by Shigaraki. Tsukauchi was left with no choice but to pray. From the top platform of the coffin in the sky, we then saw a glowing figure. As we drew closer, we saw that it was Bakugo, now standing once again. He still looked battered from what Shigaraki had done to him, but he was sweating heavily from the heat of his quirk. What this showed was that even if All Might's era ended, there were those following in his footsteps, and 2 of them were Midoriya and Bakugo. This marked the beginning of a new era for our 2 heroes. While All for One was slowly killing All Might's mind returned to the memory of when Night Eye had told him that a gruesome death was the end awaiting him on the path he had chosen. Then the scene suddenly shifted to a peaceful setting with a cool breeze blowing. On the other side of the world, we saw some people living calmly in their peaceful days in their countries, unaware of the evil All for One would bring to the whole world if he won. We also saw the anti-All for One American female weather reporter, Meryl, who was still monitoring the anomalies in the weather. Returning to Japan, we saw that the cause of the weather anomalies was the intensity of the battle between Midoriya and Shigaraki. A crew member told Meryl that her on-air stunt earlier had already spread across the internet. We also saw that some in America were silently supporting All Might, as they had heard Meryl's protest. Now Bakugo and Midoriya looked at each other and immediately understood what they had to do. Midoriya used Black Whip to momentarily apprehend Shigaraki, while Bakugo quickly flew toward them. Midoriya caught Bakugo in his hands and spun him while Bakugo continued releasing speed-boosting explosive sweat beads. Bakugo and Midoriya were giving their all. Then the second user of One for All suddenly appeared to Midoriya and called for his attention. He explained that Midoriya would not escape the effects if he used Gear Shift again, so he only had to execute it once he found the assured path to victory. After the second user explained, the vestige of All Might in One for All suddenly appeared beside him, and because of that the second user felt sadness. Once Midoriya found the sure path to victory, he immediately used the second user's quirk, Gear Shift, and applied it directly to Bakugo. Midoriya and Bakugo set their sights straight on All Might's location, with Bakugo also boosting his own speed, while Midoriya hurled him with tremendous force toward All Might. Bakugo flew like a bullet from a gun straight toward All Might. But then Shigaraki suddenly spoke, telling Midoriya that Bakugo would never reach All Might. He added that Midoriya already knew that deep inside. Shigaraki was aware that the vestige of All Might appearing inside One For All always looked faint and fuzzy because he was still alive, but now they could see it beginning to take solid form, and they knew what that meant. According to Shigaraki, All Might had shown the world a dream, but with his death the world would return to harsh reality. As we followed Bakugo's attempt to reach All Might alive, we saw Midoriya suddenly lose his worries and feel an unexplainable relief. Winds blew from behind him, symbolizing the prayers and last breaths of people, as well as Night Eye's efforts to find a future where All Might would not die. Now Midoriya understood what this form of energy truly was. It was energy born from striving toward the future and from strong wishing. Just like the question Meryl had asked earlier in the news, can the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil bring about a hurricane in Texas? Now we saw Bakugo flying toward All Might. But the truth was, he was not alone. With Bakugo were the wishes of people all over the world, along with the energy of people striving for a bright future where All For One would not kill All Might. The collective prayers of the people had the power to change the futures that Night Eye had seen. Alongside this was Bakugo's emotional flashback of confessing his negative emotions to Midoriya. Because of that, we suddenly saw Bakugo surpass All For One and sever both of his arms. At this moment, the second user and Midoriya were shocked to feel the vestige of All Might revert back to being a mirage. All Might himself was shocked at his unexpected survival, while All For One could not believe that once again a hero had interfered with him. Bakugo's rescue of All Might was successful, and with intense passion and heightened emotions he shouted, "Time to win this." Inside All Might's mind, he asked Night Eye if this was not yet the time he had foreseen for his death. Night Eye answered that the truth was this should have been it. This should have been the moment when All Might's dream ended. But Night Eye explained that fate had been reshaped. It was true that his dream ended here, but All Might's promise to Midoriya and his mother remained intact, that he would stay alive for Midoriya. All Might reasoned that everyone knew the old master had to die to pass the torch to the next generation. But Night Eye only said that All Might had simply read too many comic books, and that was not true. All Might asked himself if this was really what his own hallucination wanted to tell him. Night Eye told him that he was a hero, but also a human. And as a human, it was impossible to ever be fully ready to die. Back in the real world, shock filled the faces of those watching the battle when they saw Bakugo's blasting quirk save All Might's life. One Hercules bracer flew back to its source, while Bakugo and All Might landed on the rooftop of a 7-story building. Some spectators recognized the one who saved All Might as the kid who had been kidnapped by the League of Villains. They could not remember Bakugo's name, but they recalled he was the loud boy who had been tied up during the awards at the sports festival. Tsukauchi was in tears of joy because his prayer had been answered by Bakugo, also known as Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. Some children who had once been taught by Bakugo were overjoyed to see their idol hero. All Might noticed Bakugo's heavy breathing as he kept pushing his limit, and his sweat continued to explode from his body. Because of this, All Might asked him if he was okay. Bakugo replied that line was his, and he called All Might a banged-up bag of bones, before vomiting a large amount of blood. Then a voice spoke from inside Bakugo's body, saying he believed that line was his as well. All Might was confused, wondering who that voice inside Bakugo's body belonged to. Then Edge Shot emerged from Bakugo's chest in thread form and tightly closed the stitching. All Might was shocked at Edge Shot, who explained that he had forced out the blood that had pooled inside Bakugo's body to give him some relief. Then he cut his thread and collapsed to the ground. According to Edge Shot, Bakugo's marred organs and broken bones had been mended with his own body using Bolin knots from the hidden Hakamata style. No matter what, the repairs he had made to Bakugo's organs would not unravel. But with every breath Bakugo would feel intense pain, so it was better for him to rest rather than fight. Bakugo clutched his chest and thanked Deadshot for reviving him. But Deadshot explained that he had only held Bakugo together. Earlier, even though he had successfully restarted Bakugo's heart and lungs, the spark of life had still not returned. His Ninpo 1000 Sheet Piece Zenith was a transformation quirk that consumed his own life force. Eventually, he reached a point where he had to choose whether it was worth sacrificing himself for Bakugo's life. But at that very moment, he saw something rushing through Bakugo's bloodstream, a tiny bead of sweat produced by Bakugo's own body to deliver to his heart. As Deadshot said, he had only held Bakugo together, but the one who revived him was his own honed power. Bakugo said nothing further and began walking toward the enemy, while All Might noticed that his right arm was injured. But Bakugo asked him first who the glowing runt was that he intended to fight, assuming it was All for One. All Might confirmed that All for One was indeed their enemy. Then he asked for Bakugo's arm to transfer the remaining Hercules bracer. As the bracer relocated from All Might's arm to Bakugo's, All Might addressed Bakugo by his official hero name, Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. Bakugo was momentarily frozen, unable to respond, at the unexpected recognition from All Might. Then All Might laid down in exhaustion, saying he wished he could have provided more support for Bakugo. A bashful smile spread across Bakugo's face, and then he gave a genuine bright smile out of sheer joy. At last he had received the recognition he had long sought from his idol. Now All for One's severed arms regenerated, and he glared at Bakugo and All Might. He wanted to attack them, but he turned away, realizing it was more important to reach his brother and One for All. He realized that to obtain it, he needed an uncompromised hijacking of Shigaraki's all-too-powerful will. He had to give Shigaraki his quirk and his entire self. All for One grew irritated because things would have been much easier if the other consciousness within Shigaraki had managed to rule over him. His anger boiled further as he remembered the faces of the brave heroes Shigaraki had fought earlier. He was vexed by how awry the gears had turned. He remembered the courage and grit on the faces of heroes who gave everything to try to stop him, like Endeavor and Hawks. Beyond them, there were also students who had gone beyond their limits just to try to hinder him. Then Bakugo suddenly appeared near him, shouting that he was the final boss he would face. All for One was unprepared to take a direct hit to the face from Bakugo, and in his mind, he said he had expected the wind to blow in his favor. Then he suddenly recalled the face of the second user of One for All because of Bakugo. Stunned by that memory, he could do nothing but take Bakugo's powerful explosion. With a wide grin, Bakugo declared that since One for All could not keep All for One grounded, the other heroes would finish the job instead. By this time, the riot at Central Hospital had been suppressed, and the wounded were being treated while captives were transported. The heroes at Okudo Island had also eliminated the multi-Noma threat. Ground Zero had been secured, with Aoyama and Hagakure helping the heroes who had been caught by Kaneda. At the National Takoba area, the battle was still ongoing. Mr. Skeptic had been captured and was being transported. The escape to Shiketsu operation via the evac system had been completed, and heroes were mobilizing to safeguard the refugees from the stalled block. The Jaka Hospital ruin site was also under control. However, the whereabouts of Kurogiri, Eraserhead, and Present Mike remained unknown, keeping Tsukuchi worried. Meanwhile, on a rooftop near the battle between Midoriya and Shigaraki, Lady Nagant was still alive despite severe exhaustion and the reopening of internal wounds from forcing herself to use her quirk to support Midoriya. She did everything she could to help, as her heart as a hero had returned because of Midoriya. The explosion Bakugo delivered to All for One was immense and powerful. But beyond that, All Might was even more shocked by Bakugo's incredible speed in chasing All for One. Deadshot then told All Might how the near-death Bakugo had managed to fluster Shigaraki in their battle earlier. According to Deadshot, Bakugo seemed on the verge of grasping something essential. During the fight, Bakugo felt an exhilarating sensation from the side effects in his body caused by the extreme speed boost from the overflow. And of course, All for One managed to tank Bakugo's attack at the cost of becoming a little younger. But he said he would fight Bakugo later, because his eyes were set on Shigaraki and Midoriya. Now Shigaraki had forced his way free from Black Whip's grasp, boasting to Midoriya and saying he would just keep breaking his hold again and again. In this fight, Midoriya maintained distance from Shigaraki, using danger sense to stay alive. But how could he face a body overflowing with power, capable of regeneration, and possessing an instant death ability? He still had no answer to that problem. Midoriya knew he could only use Gear Shift once more, and if he did, he had to make it count, because the blowback would immobilize him. So he clenched his fists and said, "It ends here." Midoriya risked using Gear Shift to go beyond his limits, and alongside him Bakugo was also going beyond in the fight. In Bakugo's next attack, he unleashed a barrage of explosions that spread like a Gatling gun firing explosive rounds. He shouted at All For One, asking if he still treated him like a filler character. But All For One gave no answer and only hurried to fly toward Shigaraki. In his mind, he thought Endeavor's and Dark Shadow's attacks were stronger than Bakugo's. He continued to underestimate him, judging that Bakugo's strength was far below All Might's. According to All For One, Bakugo was nothing more than a mere pebble in his path, not worth confronting, not worth risking the advancement of his rewound state. But we saw that Bakugo was determined to face All For One. More importantly, he had figured out what was happening in his body. His speed boost and attack boost came from the pain coursing through his entire body, caused by explosive beads of sweat spreading from his palms. The intervals at which he felt the timing of pain in each location gave him information, and by using his intuition, he could time his backup blasts efficiently. Because of this, he could charge forward at extreme speed and even catch up to All For One with ease. All For One was shocked to see Bakugo, but Bakugo hurt himself from overusing his speed boost and even crash-landed. All For One wondered what was wrong with Bakugo. Then Bakugo remembered his honest words from before, when he asked if he could still catch up to Midoriya. And now he felt he could even overtake Midoriya, because he had managed to easily catch up to All For One. Meanwhile, inside the refuge at Shiketsu High, Bakugo's parents noticed their son being televised on live news. His father was nervous, saying All For One was a terrifying enemy, but his mother urged him to watch because she still saw the cheerful grin on their son's face, the same grin he always wore. All For One was unsettled by what he saw. Bakugo vexed him even more than All Might. Then All For One suddenly recalled the second user because Bakugo resembled him. In that instant, All For One remembered all the hatred he had harbored. He blamed him for the loss of his brother. And as Bakugo blasted him again with a powerful explosion, All For One shouted in his mind the name of the one he hated most above all others. All For One crashed into a building, and Bakugo immediately pursued him. Because Midoriya had used Gear Shift on Bakugo, Bakugo seemed to have gained an essence from the second user. At that point, All For One, consumed by rage, shouted that Kudo was the one responsible for everything. Bakugo mocked All For One for becoming senile, saying his name was not Kudo, it was Kachan Bakugo. But now, let us first go to a flashback and learn All For One's origin story. There was a female prostitute who had been suffering for almost a year from hardened growths on her left arm. She was unaware of her own pregnancy during the first 8 months. The reason was not only her unstable lifestyle. She simply could not feel the twins already in her uterus who had begun to sap away her very life force. The mother gave birth alone on a riverbank and died on the spot, and for some reason the hardened growths on her left arm suddenly disappeared. The 2 babies were left there with no one. As rats arrived to eat the 2 babies and their mother, the flooding river suddenly swept the babies away. A year later, this was the time when news of a glowing baby spread, followed by many different reports of emerging meta abilities worldwide. Many of these meta abilities appeared not only in newborns, but also in children undergoing puberty. A research group once studied them and hypothesized that meta abilities came from a novel disease, and that people with meta abilities were a sub-branch of humans who had developed new genetic factors. The announcement of this news was far too reckless and premature. And because people are social organisms, this statement became a fiercely divisive factor in a society already regressing into chaos. One night, amidst a normalized chaos, a fire broke out in part of the city, so firefighters responded. They discussed how they had learned that some meta freaks had gathered in the industrial zone. One firefighter suggested that those meta freaks might be the same group that clashed with demonstrators the night before. Because of this, The firefighters agreed it would be better to stop the meta freaks before they could regroup and rise up. Then several firefighters were startled when they noticed a child approaching. One of them asked the child who he was, but he stood there silently under a dark cloak. They dismissed the child, with one saying he might be an exceptional child. Another said he was not happy about the idea of leaving the child, but that they should still leave him because there was a high chance that children were carriers. After that, the frightening eyes of the child all for one suddenly opened wide. The firefighters turned their backs and started walking away, but as the child all for one activated the quirk he was using, it produced a faint shook sound. Some firefighters looked back, wondering where it came from, but before they could react, a long, piercing bioskeletal spike flew toward them and struck 3 of them in the head. Next, the child all for one rushed all the firefighters in the area and simultaneously released numerous spikes from his arms and legs to stab them. The force of his attack even severed and destroyed some of his targets' heads and limbs. What the child all for one used here was the very meta ability he had stolen from his own mother. From the very moment of his birth, the child all for one was imbued with hubris and disrespect for others. His view of everything within his reach was that they were his possessions, and that included his mother herself, his mother's quirk, and even his own twin baby brother. Meanwhile, anyone who gave him nothing, who did not even look at him when he cried and screamed, he regarded with utter distrust. All for one was born as a baby who was literally pure evil. As a small boy living in the city, he was a terrifying little monster who lurked in the chaos of the streets night after night to feed on people and steal various meta abilities. People feared him, except for one person who threw cans at him to stop his killing spree. That person was none other than Onii-Chan, his twin baby brother and the original wielder of One for All. The reason Onii-Chan had been small and frail since birth was that All for One had constantly stolen almost all the nutrients their mother had provided. So no matter how Onii-Chan begged his brother to stop hurting people, he could do nothing and was easily brushed aside. Onii-Chan provided nothing to All for One either, but even so, his brother still considered him one of his possessions that he would never simply let go or release. Years passed, and the boys grew a little amid the growing societal divide, and the original glowing baby reported in the news had now become a leader. His movement to restore a peaceful and safe society was gaining more and more supporters. During this time, the Shigaraki twins lived among the rubble of a broken section of an abandoned building. One day, the child all for one came home and asked his brother what he was hiding from him and reading now. Onii-Chan explained that he was only learning to read and was not truly literate yet, so he could not read big fancy books. But he was happy because this comic was easy to read, as it felt like reading just by looking at its pictures. Moreover, it told the hopes and dreams of the people in those pictures. With a curious face, the child all for one looked at the hero Onii-Chan pointed to from the comic, the one he said he wanted to emulate someday. That hero was Captain Hero. At this time, Onii-Chan had not yet completely given up on his older brother. From his infant memories, he still recalled his brother gripping his hand tightly, and he wanted to believe that his brother's grip came from gentleness and kindness. But after 3 years, Onii-Chan was suddenly shocked one day when his brother came home with news. The famous glowing baby had reached 10 million supporters, and his brother asked him why so many people had chosen them simply because they had been officially recorded as the first meta people in the record books. According to the news the teenage all for one brought to Onii-Chan, 2 weeks ago in India, there were 50 babies born with meta abilities. To him, it was bizarre that just because of this they had rallied an immense number of people. And the reason Onii-Chan was so shocked to see his brother was that his brother's body was glowing. The teenage all for one said he had killed the leader himself and stolen his possession. Onii-Chan simply asked his brother why he had done that. So his brother asked if he remembered what the Captain Hero comic had said. Then his brother quoted it to him, "One for all and all for one." And according to him, these were words to live by. He said that according to the comics, Captain Hero had to hide his true identity and continue fighting alone, while the wicked demon lord was respected by everyone and all paid tribute to him out of sheer fear. And just as Captain Hero inspired Onii-Chan, the wicked demon lord inspired All for One to have a dream in which he longed for a world that existed for his sake alone. This was the first time in All For One's life that he revealed his iconic, creepy smile. After a long time, we suddenly moved to another flashback of All For One, where he saw his brother Yoichi leaving him. All For One felt a profound betrayal because he had just given his brother his own power as a gift. And because of All For One's tunnel vision, he noticed late that there was a man he did not know pulling Yoichi away from him. Since the man's back was turned, he shouted at him to look at him and declared that Yoichi belonged to him. Blinded by rage at realizing Yoichi refused to remain his, All For One suddenly unleashed an attack using the spatial distortion meta ability. He aimed it directly at Yoichi out of fury. There was no escape for Yoichi from this attack, and his entire body was obliterated, except for his left hand. All For One himself named his brother Yoichi, drawn from the kanji characters for bestow and one. He chose that name because Yoichi was the very first thing ever given to All For One in his life. All For One was stunned by what he had done. At this point, 2 months had passed since the day Yoichi walked away from his older brother, and this was the first time All For One saw Yoichi again, inside the sewer hideout of Kudo's resistance group, which he had entered alone. The soldiers there immediately ran away from him. Kudo even stumbled in his panic, so the soon-to-be third user of One For All helped him up so he could run again. All For One locked eyes with him here for the first time, and to All For One, Kudo was the man who had stolen his brother from him, a precious possession. Kudo could not tell what mixed emotions were on All For One's face as he stared with intense resentment. But ever since All For One's birth, there had never been any shine visible in his eyes, as if a thin membrane clouded them. There was no reflection of Kudo in All For One's lenses, in contrast to Kudo's eyes. Sometime later, one night in the skyscraper where All For One lived, we saw him holding the remaining hand taken from his brother's remains. He noticed that the meta ability he had given his brother had vanished. All For One sat alone at his dinner table, puzzled, because this was the first time he had observed such a thing. He had forced a power onto Yoichi, even though Yoichi refused to accept it, since he did not want to take a gift stolen from others, especially because when All For One gave out meta abilities, they came with a lifetime of servitude. Using All For One's power to sense meta abilities, it was confirmed that no meta ability remained in Yoichi. In All For One's mind, he said he had wondered back then if he himself had stolen his brother's true power, because he had been too young to know. But after careful examination, it turned out Yoichi did have a quirk factor, a broken, non-functioning chunk of trash that could not even be called a proper factor. All For One then wondered if Yoichi's malnutrition had kept the factor from ever fully forming when it should have appeared, and whether somehow it had only now activated itself. That very same night in a secret underground base, we saw Kudo speaking with the soon-to-be third user. He called him boss and asked whether All For One had managed to lay a hand on him on the day he destroyed their group in the sewers. Kudo did not want to think too deeply and just told Bruce to show him the results of the tests they were conducting. Bruce told Kudo that he had mentioned earlier a strange off feeling in his body since that day, and Bruce said he had been surprised that Kudo had noticed what had happened to him. He now had 2 factors inside his body. Kudo still carried his original factor, along with another factor that looked like an unformed dud. Kudo had nothing to say at first, but he added that he had thought that might be what he had been feeling. As he said this, we also saw All For One thinking about the meta ability he had gifted Yoichi, and his theory was that Yoichi's dud factor had absorbed the quirk factor All For One had given him to make up for what it lacked, stolen, in a sense. In a light and dark contrast, we simultaneously saw the memories of Kudo and All For One about Yoichi. Here, Yoichi told Kudo that he had been unable to stop his brother, while on the other side, he expressed to his older brother his thankfulness for raising and keeping him alive. Next, Yoichi told Kudo that his brother saw people only as playthings and prizes to be won. In contrast, he expressed his regrets because he had never seen even a trace of compassion for others in his brother. Kudo and All For One realized at the same time, through their memories of Yoichi, that within them the will of Yoichi seemed to remain alive. Yoichi's truest sentiment before he died was regret over All For One's power to give and take, because it could have been used for good. It could have been the kindest and most charitable power ever in the world. Then we saw tears falling from All For One's eyes as he stared at Kudo and gripped him by the neck. This was All For One's sentiment. My false tears served as a way to sow confusion and disappointment. Everything I hated, everything I manipulated, everything I rotted, and everything I coveted, all so that all of it would be mine. This was what always resided in All For One's heart through his decades upon decades living as a demon lord, during which he met Dr. Tsubasa and killed the succeeding wielders of One For All like Bruce and Banjo. Throughout All For One's life as a demon lord, he saw again and again his brother's continued misbehavior against his will. So even when he split the sixth user at the torso, that user still smiled at him and remained brave and stubborn. This grit did not disappear from the users of One For All, not even in Nana. All those years, all For One wanted was to regain his brother, so he hunted and pursued without cease, until the fated day when he faced All Might at his prime. All Might struck him head-on with an incredibly powerful straight punch to the forehead and nose, inflicting catastrophic damage. Even then, the only thought in All For One's mind was his brother continually slipping from his grasp. This was the day All Might also received a fatal wound to his side, and he thought All For One was dead, but Dr. Tsubasa revived All For One and repaired his ruined head. Back in the present, we saw All For One, furious, shouting at Bakugo while imagining he was Kudo, as he unleashed numerous quirk combos from his body. In All For One's mind, he knew Kudo's bloodline had ended. There was no chance of offspring because he had eliminated every woman Kudo had been involved with, as well as any children close to him. All For One was certain that if Bakugo somehow had Kudo's blood, he would have sensed it the first time they met back during Shigaraki's League of Villains. But he looked again at Bakugo flying upward into the sky, and now he realized he could see it in his eyes. Before, Bakugo's eyes had not looked like this. Bakugo seemed to have only an incidental resemblance to Kudo. What puzzled All For One was that he believed, deep inside, that Kudo's willful resolve had crossed time and space into Bakugo at this moment for the sole purpose of thwarting him. We also saw in Bakugo's expression that All For One's feeling was true, that there was indeed a willful resolve in Bakugo's eyes. Now All For One thought there would be no point in his original plan to forcibly warp Bakugo away to remove a thorn in his side, because the only viable warp points available to him were All Might and Shigaraki, who were already nearby. All For One knew he could not afford to drag out his battle with Bakugo, because the longer it went, the further he would shrink. He was also aware that once he reached Shigaraki there would be new conflict, since Shigaraki had already rejected him once. All For One's ultimate goal now was to save all his remaining strength for transferring his quirk to Shigaraki later. He knew this was the most logical plan of action. But, because of his overwhelming rage toward Bakugo, he let go of his rational thinking and allowed his emotions to dictate his next move. Now, killing Bakugo, reaching his goal, and executing the transfer were all one and the same to All For One. So he prepared his strongest attack. From within the One For All dimension, we saw Yoichi standing alone at the center. The pupils of his eyes lit up as he looked behind him when he sensed his brother approaching, and that sensation came from the sheer intensity and presence of All For One as he used Omni Factor Unleash. All For One goal. We saw that with this, countless monstrous quirk combo creations burst from All For One's body, with many human figures mixed in that resembled the original quirk owners whose powers he had stolen. Included in the combo were surges of electric dark matter energy and glowing plasma. It resonated into a gigantic energy field sphere around All For One as he flew toward Bakugo, demolishing the surrounding buildings along his path. All Might and Edshot also felt the intensity because they were nearby. Edshot wondered aloud if All For One was now using a massive energy surge to fuel his propulsion, unsure if it was his intention to claim victory with this single giant burst. In All Might's mind, he knew this action would revert All For One into a baby, and that he seemed to be gambling everything on it, so All Might shouted to Bakugo to dodge All For One's attack. But Bakugo stood his ground and remarked, "Some genius I am." Then, smiling, he asked himself how he could even dream of defeating All For One's incoming attack. While Bakugo faced the Omni-Factor Unleash of All For One, he reflected back on his past, from when he was just a baby. He also remembered his first fight with Midoriya, where he told him that he would make his skills his own and continue to rise. There was also a time he said that his explosions could pull off anything he wanted. Then he thought of Izuku Midoriya and said he would not stand in his way anymore. As he said that, All For One attacked, so All Might told Bakugo to dodge. But because All For One blasted forward so quickly, the force of his attack sent ripples through the air, strong enough to blow away both All Might and Ed's shot. Meanwhile, even though All Might told Bakugo to evade, he kept firm in his position, wishing for All For One to blow up. Blow the hell up, he even said, even though he himself was in close proximity, bleeding from his entire face. Fortunately, his wish came true, because right in the middle of All For One's attack, multiple explosions went off. All For One was shocked at the event, since he had not seen Bakugo take any clear action just then. Bakugo explained that the rain was dampening his oomph, so he had fired off some coated beads. He meant beads of explosive sweat coated with regular sweat, which he shot without triggering them, hoping something else might set them off on a delay. All For One then realized that Bakugo had placed them straight into his mouth at the last second when he got close. Bakugo then said that if nothing else, he always earned kudos for his intuition. He also declared that the one quirk he has was enough to defeat All For One, because he knew the more damage All For One took, the younger he became, as All Might had told him. Meanwhile, All For One realized his powers had been thrown into disarray because of the damage, but insisted that he only needed to unleash them once more, because that was his tale. He told Bakugo to move aside, calling him an extra and a nobody. Of course, in typical Bakugo fashion, he did not listen. He attacked head-on once again, this time using his howitzer impact. Multiple explosions hit All For One, and because Bakugo's attack was so grand, All Might saw it from where he was. Bakugo seemed to notice something, so he did not stop his assault, continuing to rain massive explosions down onto All For One's body, disintegrating his large form. As he kept at it, he shouted at All For One to get wrecked, and to shut the hell up. All For One's body grew smaller and smaller as Bakugo blew apart the quirks released by the Omni Factor Unleash. As the explosions reached their peak, All For One noticed something was off within him. His quirk factors were not mingling properly, so he wondered how Bakugo's fireworks could be tearing them apart. Was it because his body had become too young or too delicate? Then we saw the teenage version of All For One inside the Vestige realm, and someone told him that his nasty negative emotions had put him in a tailspin, which was why he was losing control of them, the vestiges of the people he had stolen quirks from. The one speaking was none other than Hawks, who even joked that this joint had become his fan meetup venue. He then teased All For One by asking if Shigaraki had swallowed him up, sticking his tongue out to show he was mocking him. Back in the real world, even with his armor and gear shattered, Bakugo continued his assault, landing a powerful blast right in All For One's face while telling him to get it straight, because that battle was their tale. Bakugo's attack sent All For One crashing into the ground, creating a massive crater. Watching from different places, different people watched the battle, including Bakugo's parents, Yoichi, and All Might, who remarked that little by little, all the damage inflicted on All For One, along with all the built-up aggravation, was finally taking effect. For certain, at that moment, All For One had been defeated. However, unbeknownst to All Might, All For One was still alive, now in the form of a struggling infant inside the crater. Bakugo, on the other hand, said he had never hoped to defeat All For One, at least not alone. Now as nothing more than an infant, All For One crawled across the battlefield, thinking that with just a little more effort he would be able to transfer his quirk to Tomura Shigaraki. His other self had likely been swallowed up and suppressed, but he still believed he could empower him to wrest back control of his supremely sinister body and mind. Based on his observations of Shigaraki, that other self had already been taken out of commission before it could employ any last-ditch tactic. Victory was still within reach. He only needed to control Shigaraki and steal one for all, because without Yoichi, everything would be meaningless. He added that the negatives in life tend to stick in one's memory for a very long time, which is why he crushed the futures of others. He wanted the eyes of everyone fixed on him forever. A bit further, he told himself, even though he was just an infant crawling and burning. Then Bakugo emerged from the smoke, and asked why he had not poofed away yet. All for One was stunned to see Bakugo, who was still forcing himself to move, even as he shivered and his heart throbbed violently. He even vomited blood at that moment. He was cold, powerless, and could no longer stand. All for One told him to step aside, but the only thing he heard was the cry of a child. From this, Bakugo realized that All for One could no longer speak and was on the verge of birth, which meant death. That alone, he thought, was enough for All for One to fade away, even without his help. After that, Bakugo collapsed under his own weight, as he remembered what he once told Kirishima back at the UA dorms, that just being able to stand through anything makes you crazy strong. Because of that, he managed to catch himself, which shocked All for One, whose face was in complete shock. Bakugo said that was close, and that he would never settle for anything less than absolute victory. All for One told him to stay back as spear-like bones shot from All for One's mouth. That caused an explosion on Bakugo's face, and we learn he caught the spear-like bone with his own mouth and blew it apart, telling All for One nighty-night. This terrified All for One, as his spear-like bones shattered. His body once again began to reverse, and he could not believe he had let his emotions get the better of him, because that was not who he was. He screamed no and hate over and over as he rewound again. But this time he could not stop it and regressed into nothing more than an embryo. At the same time, quirk factors began to disappear within All for One. Hawks commented that the return of stolen factors to their former owners might be a nice bonus, but that was not how it worked. He smiled as he faded from the vestige realm, while All for One dwindled further into an egg cell until he finally disappeared from the world. When All for One vanished, Bakugo cursed because his body was about to fall. He had wanted to pull off All Might's standing victory pose, so instead, he did it lying on the ground, and he told Midoriya to give hell to Shigaraki. Then we returned to a few days before the operation. Best Jeanist said that Shigaraki was bound to strike at the UA campus. If they let him touch the ground, they would be put in a very distressed state. Tamaki asked if Shigaraki being on the ground would put them at a disadvantage like at Jakku, since he had heard stories. Best Jeanist replied no, because what he meant was being united in purpose in regards to what they sought to protect. Neijire added that they should evacuate the entire area, meaning Best Jeanist was saying they needed to guard entire buildings. Edshot said that they assumed architecture would not survive anyway, because their hands would already be full enough. Rather, they had set aside such concerns the moment they decided to assign Dobby's battle to Kamino Ward. They were acting in the hope of saving lives and ensuring the future for everyone. Mirko bluntly told Best Jeanist he was talking too much, so they should just get to the point. Best Jeanist then said the issue was Shigaraki's personality, which was in a state of flux. They preferred the All for One persona, because its domination required living subjects to dominate. Bakugo said that if Shigaraki was the one in control, he would not be so merciful. Best Jeanist added that with such strength and hatred brewing within Shigaraki, his desire for destruction might direct itself toward the very earth. In a world where they emerged victorious, even if they fought and rose back from dire straits, it would mean nothing if there was no foundation to stand on. What they needed to protect were the people. Meanwhile, at the evacuation shelter, people were watching the live broadcast and saw floods consuming their land. Among them was Midoriya's mother, who worried for him. Shigaraki said he was not directing his decay over the surface, but downward, nice and deep. He declared that a hefty chunk of Shizuoka Prefecture would vanish in the blink of an eye, 378,000 square miles of the country itself. Give him just 1 week, he said, and nothing would remain but sea and sky. Snuffing out any hope of restoration, he said, was the true meaning of destroying everything. As he spoke, Midoriya chased him. Midoriya used a smash attack against Shigaraki, explaining that by running the second's gear shift, the third's Fajin, and the fourth's danger sense in parallel, he could truly go on the offensive, unlike earlier. However, he still needed a clue as to how to stop Shigaraki, and he needed it quick. Shigaraki then told Midoriya that All for One was already dead. All because he had not broken Bakugo hard enough. It was his fault. But he said he was grateful to Bakugo because he had made him stronger. Strong enough to adapt to Midoriya's speed. As he said this, he slipped behind Midoriya and reached to grab him from the back. Midoriya's danger sense triggered, and he turned to face Shigaraki, only to find his hand already at his face. Midoriya quickly slashed off Shigaraki's fingers. Shigaraki remarked that Midoriya had cut his fingers just in time to avoid a touching moment, but told him to face the facts. At the same time, Banjo called to Midoriya, saying something about Shinomori and his danger sense, which shocked Midoriya. Shigaraki mocked him, asking how long he thought he could keep it up. In the next scene, we move to the vestiges of One for All, where Yoichi said they should not cling to sentimentality. That battle had long been passed on to the successors, and defeating Tomura Shigaraki was the entire reason they still existed. Banjo then said that until Midoriya could find a way to break past that regeneration wall, the fight against Shigaraki would remain like a losing battle. Then suddenly, Shinomori's powers were triggered as he sensed danger. This was followed by Shigaraki's gigantic hand entering the space where the vestiges were. Shinomori pushed the others away to protect them from getting caught by Shigaraki. As a result, he was the one who got caught, so he told the others that the ninth, Midoriya, was in their hands. Shinomori's disappearance was what Banjo was trying to explain to Midoriya. He said that Shinomori and his danger sense had already been stolen. Then Shigaraki spoke about the unbroken chain of inherited might, the very power that had driven his master up the wall. He said he did not share that obsession, but if it could help him destroy Midoriya, he would take that power for himself. Meanwhile, Entei, the sixth user of One for All, asked if Shinomori and even his seat would just disappear like that. Shigaraki had simply entered their psychic space and taken one of them as if it was nothing. In Shigaraki and Midoriya's battle, Midoriya used Black Whip and Fajin, combining them further with Gear Shift. He called the attack Black Chain, but Shigaraki evaded it effortlessly. Because of that, Shigaraki mocked Midoriya, saying it was no wonder he could dodge all of his attacks. On the other hand, Midoriya realized that Shigaraki was already using the danger sense of the fourth. Shigaraki then said that his destruction could begin with the biggest pain in his neck, Midoriya. As he charged forward, he asked Midoriya if he was still seriously treating him as a human being. Was it because Midoriya could not pretend he had not seen him crying? Was he still hung up on that? Shigaraki told him to take a good look, because he had moved so far beyond being human. With the sheer strength of his attack, he sent Midoriya flying a great distance. Midoriya bounced across the ground because of that. But the damage he took was not that severe because he had surrounded himself with Black Chain. Even so, he was completely exhausted. He then realized that his mask had been completely broken. It was the mask that All Might had returned to him. Bloodied and weary at that moment, he suddenly heard Bruce Lee, the third user, saying that he had only used the mask to breathe through the roiling waves, but he should now look at where they were because of Shigaraki's reckless rampage. Midoriya looked around and noticed that they were now surrounded by land and trees. He realized they were very close to Mount Fuji, while Bruce pointed out that Gear Shift was already wearing off. Bruce reminded him to keep in mind that Shigaraki had only stolen a quirk, which did not affect Midoriya's overall physical boost. Midoriya's raw strength was stacked up in One for All, not in quirk factors, so all he had to do was survive until he was fully recovered, and then asked if Midoriya should be using his power to escape and save himself instead. Because of that, Banjo asked him if he was being serious, and replied that it was Shinomori and his danger sense that had saved them a minute ago, but the next time Shigaraki managed to grab Midoriya, he could take every single one of them into his grasp. They would be stolen, and that would be the end of the battle. Meanwhile, in the fight, Shigaraki asked if the vestiges thought he could not see them, as they were discussing a plan to escape, and was shocked to hear this. And Shigaraki added that running and hiding was how they grew stronger, so he needed to destroy them before their next escape. He said he would crush them until they had nowhere left to run, because Spinner was truly looking forward to the flattened horizon he would create. This was followed by a powerful rumbling and the destruction of Mount Fuji, as Shigaraki declared that the mountain would sink by the time he was finished there. He gleefully carried this out without anyone challenging him. That was because Midoriya simply stood there, and Banjo told him that Shigaraki had deliberately chased him to that place. Fuji would erupt once it was struck by Shigaraki's decay. Then En told Yoichi that Shigaraki was not a proper successor to All for One. He delighted only in destruction, and he was ruin incarnate. Meanwhile, Midoriya realized the direness of the situation and what would happen if Mount Fuji was destroyed, so he did not follow On's suggestion to run away. At the same time, he remembered his talk with Uraraka, where she had told him that Toga was still a person too, and she had no idea what might be obvious to her, just like the things she took for granted. Because of that, he told Shigaraki that somehow everything was still connected, and that somewhere within him, there was still a person. As he said this, he surrounded his hand with Black Whip, which activated Shigaraki's danger sense. Then, Midoriya charged forward and said that within his body, focusing on defense left him immobilized. So in the meantime, he used the Black Whip of the fifth to flex and extend his muscles manually. That was to push his muscles to the limit to build up power for Fajin from the third user. This allowed him to unleash blasts of air at Shigaraki, and because of that, his glove was completely destroyed. While doing so, he flashed back to when he first began using that power. This was followed by his training with that power, to the point that his fingers would break, until he eventually mastered that skill. Shigaraki prepared to counter the attack. The strike that Midoriya unleashed was Delaware Smash, and even though Shigaraki had danger sense, he was unable to avoid the Delaware Smash. Shigaraki laughed at Midoriya despite that, saying that it was peak performance from him. That was because Midoriya had predicted the path and range of his decay, and used a wind blast to gouge out the land and blow it away. By removing a medium for his power to travel through, he can delay the advance of his destructive force. However, it was only a stopgap measure. Shigaraki launched himself and said that he would apply his own touch as much as it took. At the same time, his danger sense was triggered, and he wondered why the dust cloud did not disperse. That was because Midoriya had used it as cover for a surprise attack with Black Whip. But Shigaraki already expected that, saying he understood it. However, to his surprise, Midoriya suddenly appeared out of nowhere, not even detected by Shigaraki's danger sense. This resulted in Midoriya striking Shigaraki's hand and completely severing it. But it did not end there, as Midoriya lost control and crashed down to the ground. Then it was revealed that he had applied the gear shift of the second user in low gear with the smokescreen of the sixth user, holding the cloud in place. This set off constant alarms in Shigaraki's head through danger sense. Then, using the Black Whip of the fifth while Shigaraki's vision was obscured, Midoriya launched his attack. Meanwhile, he would store up power, since he understood the risks of relying too heavily on danger sense. Because of what Midoriya did, instead he went to great lengths to store up power. Unfortunately, he was easily detected by Shigaraki's search quirk, and that was exactly what happened as Shigaraki overwhelmed him with rivet stab attacks. Shigaraki mockingly reminded him that he could see everything, including his location and his weaknesses. That was because of Tomoko's search quirk, a member of the Wild Pussycats. In a flashback, Tomoko said she knew everything about everyone she saw, up to 100 people at a time. Shigaraki even asked Midoriya if he was having trouble breathing. Then, inside the vestige space, Banjo said that gear shift's time was up and the recoil was approaching. Meanwhile, Shigaraki said that charged-up attacks were not meant for random rapid fire either, and while he said this, he regenerated the arm that Midoriya had cut off. He added that he noticed Midoriya reinforcing his tendons and muscles from the inside. It was clear enough, since the black coils were visible through Midoriya's skin. On top of that, if Midoriya smashed him down with one of his smash moves, he might not be able to put himself back together. But wasn't life supposed to be tough when there were so many things worth protecting, he asked. Midoriya responded that he would not give up on the crying boy he saw, the person inside Shigaraki. After saying that, he attacked, and this time used a kick attack. Shigaraki then said that people interpreted the world around them through narrow, limited windows. As the people at UA watched the battle, Shigaraki explained that when the world threw the inexplicable at people, they created rationales to put themselves at ease. Now Midoriya was cramming him into his narrow worldview, like forcing a square peg into a round hole. He then asked Midoriya if he could really see everything. Just like how he could see Midoriya's ghostly companions, the vestiges. He knew that One for All was letting Midoriya peek inside him, and that was how he tracked him even through the smoke. So, he told Midoriya to take a good look at him. The crying little kid had already been overcome and buried long ago. His worldview had taken over, and the crying child Midoriya once saw was gone. What remained was only Tamura Shigaraki, and he said he was doing just peachy. After saying this, Nana Shimura, the seventh user, appeared, while Midoriya thought about how he wanted to save the little boy inside Shigaraki, because when he was young, he too wanted to be a hero. However, Nana told him to give up, because there were people out there who could not be saved. She told Midoriya that in the face of the ideals he carries as a hero, Shigaraki represented an insurmountable challenge, an impenetrable wall he did not need to overcome. His only option was to annihilate Shigaraki in a single blow, leaving nothing behind. He had to accept it and grin and bear it. She told him to charge up for a strike even mightier than before. However, Midoriya replied that he would not do that, because he needed to ask why Shigaraki could not let go of his sad, lonely past. All Shigaraki had done was place a lid over his past, and because of that, Nana cried. Then Midoriya recalled that Shigaraki had said he ignored what he could not protect and swept all their pain under the rug. So Midoriya declared that until Shigaraki's lid shattered into pieces, he would not stop smashing away at it. Because of what Midoriya said, Kudo stated that this was the reason he had always opposed Midoriya. He said Midoriya's desire to save his archenemy was delusional madness, a madness that disrupted their destined path. He called it arrogant thinking born of a naive, peace-addled existence. But having observed from within, he now knew the truth. Midoriya clung to one driving notion, that even the vilest among them, even the quirkless, had an innately human heart that beat within them. Because of that, Kudo himself wanted to believe in that. Then, a star-creased hand, belonging to none other than Star and Stripe, pointed something out in the Vestige realm. Kudo and All Might both noticed it. When Kudo saw what Star and Stripe pointed at, he said to call him a fan of saccharine sentiment, but Midoriya would do exactly as she said. He said he was entrusting everything to Midoriya, and that it was time to part ways with One for All. As he said this, the scene flashed back to the moment when All Might had told Midoriya that he could become a hero. Inside the Vestige realm, we see the vestige of All Might, who witnessed the final moments of Star and Stripe's battle against Shigaraki. In that fight, she saw the deep core within Shigaraki, and as she disappeared, she saw that at that core, a child was surrounded by hands. That was the crying child Midoriya also saw within Shigaraki, his true persona, Tenko Shimura. At present, Star and Stripe called out to her master All Might, pointing to the core of Shigaraki, where there was a forlorn little boy. Then we shift back to the real world, where Edshot was trying to wake All Might, telling him that if he drifted off now, he might die, so he had to remain conscious. He added that since he did not have an earpiece, he had no idea about the latest news, but it was likely that Midoriya was still fighting. Meanwhile, All Might wondered if he was dreaming, but he quickly realized it was not a dream, because he said he knew that sensation. It was just like before. Even though One for All was so far away, he could still feel it, and the very will of it was finding its way to him. Then he said that the power that they had been spun together bit by bit was coming unraveled, because from far away, two successors were clashing at the bottom of Mount Fuji. Meanwhile, we return to the fight between the two, and Shigaraki could not believe what was happening inside his own head. He wondered how Star and Stripe could be inside his mind, since she should have been completely obliterated when he defeated her. He remembered what she told him, that as long as people stood to protect each other, the will of heroism would always be inherited. Though dead and gone, he was still haunted by the embers of Star and Stripe. At the same time, Midoriya was launched very far away by Shigaraki's attack. He bounced repeatedly over a great distance, before finally crashing into the ground. At the brink of death, he remembered All Might's words that he could become a hero. Then he asked Kudo, the second user, what he meant about parting ways with One for All. Kudo replied that Midoriya should calm his heart, otherwise Shigaraki would notice. He explained that the dark mass within Shigaraki was solid like a ball of lead. It was made from every small kernel of anger within Shigaraki, his frustration, his discontent, and his memories as well. All of it was drawn together into a single united mass that represented Shigaraki's unshakable resolve, his spirit solidified by raw hatred. However, All Might had noticed a rift there, whom Kudo called Yagi. That was likely a scar from Shigaraki's battle against Star and Stripe. It was not a physical scar, but a mental one that refused to heal even with his regeneration. Midoriya asked what that had to do with One for All. Kudo answered that now that Shigaraki had absorbed All for One, he was far too strong. Midoriya could no longer win by pitting strength against strength, so they would have to attack from within. The transfer of One for All would break open that scar, and the vestiges would pry into it and give Shigaraki's soul a direct beating. Midoriya then asked how the transfer would destroy the scar. En replied that it did not make sense, because transferring One for All would only give Shigaraki their powers to use, just like when he absorbed Shinomori, but Kudo said he was using the broader meaning of transfer and told En to try to follow along. All Might then suggested using visualization to help Midoriya understand what Kudo meant, just like he once did with him. Kudo said he had the right analogy. Then he asked Midoriya how his childhood friend, Bakugo, handed him things. That was when Midoriya understood what Kudo meant, and Kudo added that the right sort of transfer could even wound what it was passed to. It could even destroy what was handed down, so they would put that idea into practice with One for All itself. However, in truth, there was no guarantee it would work, so he said he would be the test run. The other users were surprised by this. Kudo then asked if they remembered how Shinomori alone was stolen earlier. If only one piece of the whole could be taken, that suggested they could transfer a single piece at a time. They were the factors incorporated into One for All, making them components of the overall quirk, but also special and powered-up factors in their own right. He told Midoriya to hurl him hard enough at Shigaraki that he would shatter into nothing, serving as an attack, without giving Shigaraki power over him, and said that if it was just a test run, then he and his smokescreen should be used instead, since he was the most useless right now. But Kudo insisted that they start with him. At that moment, Shigaraki found them. His expression showed that he knew the vestiges were talking. At the same time, En insisted that gear shift was the cornerstone of this fight. If things did not go as planned, Shigaraki would get Kudo's power, but Kudo answered that if they did not act now, Midoriya would die. Then he told Midoriya to part ways with gear shift, which would also free him from its crippling recoil. Even if by some terrible miracle Shigaraki could use it, the backlash Midoriya felt would also be transferred to Shigaraki. After saying that, Bruce told Kudo, whom he called leader, that he was with him every step of the way, though he thought it was too risky. Kudo replied that it was just as he said, a bet, a gamble. They had lived through cruel times, and when pushed against the wall, they had to make many callous judgment calls. Nothing could be crueler than their current reality. Still, Midoriya refused to give up, and Kudo wanted to believe that he's got the right idea. Then we see a flashback of Midoriya crying as he thanked All Might for all the help he had given him. After that, he stood up, while Nana Shimura said that even at this late hour, it is not that Midoriya was reluctant to relinquish power, nor does he fear death. No matter how impossibly daunting the mission he had been given, he still saw One for All as an irreplaceable gift, the power given to him by the hero he admired most, Toshinori Yagi, also known as All Might. That was because All Might had told Midoriya long ago to take One for All to heart, since he had earned it fair and square. Meanwhile, as Shigaraki charged forward, he asked the vestiges what they were talking about. At the same time, Kudo ordered Banjo to stick with Midoriya until the end, because his Black Whip would keep him alive. Then he turned to Yoichi and told him to watch over Midoriya. Yoichi answered with a yes and called Kudo his hero. Kudo then said that all that was left was to hear from Izuku Midoriya, asking what he thought. Midoriya answered that he would do it, and immediately retaliated against Shigaraki's attack with his own flurry of strikes using Black Whip, cutting off one of Shigaraki's hands again. Shigaraki mocked Midoriya's appearance, saying he'd never guess he was a hero with how he looks right now, since his whole body and face were now covered in Black Whip like a monster. In a flashback not too long ago, Shigaraki had noticed that Midoriya did this to reinforce his tendons and muscles from the inside. Even though Midoriya's body was broken and battered, he still found a way to fight by wrapping Black Whip around his entire body. Banjo was shocked when he realized it. Wallen was amazed at Midoriya's ability to put an idea into action in the heat of battle. He called it a wild way to utilize a quirk. Then Kudo said it was perfect, because Midoriya was not driven by duty. Rather, his respect and admiration for quirks themselves made One for All shine even brighter. In Midoriya's mind, he had to cope with Shigaraki's speed without using the gear shift of the second user, so he would deliver Kudo full-on. That was the only gamble they had left, and he explained that in order to transfer One for All, the person he wants to receive it has to take in some of his DNA. He remembered that, because that was what All Might told him when he ate his hair. All Might had also said that One for All could only be transferred if the holder willed it, and it could not be given to an unwilling recipient. Back in the Vestige realm, Kudo said that he and Bruce had come up with that theory and put it into practice. He said it truly brought back memories. Even long past their own deaths, they were still beholden to their duty. Midoriya then said that their plan was for his blood to serve as the transfer agent when it entered an open wound. The only problem was Shigaraki's regeneration ability, since wounds never lasted long. The only viable opening was at the moment of impact. Beyond that, he was barely conscious after the recoil from gear shift, but he needed to land the next hit precisely. Meanwhile, Shigaraki thought of something. Back to Midoriya's last attack, which had given him the creeps, leading him to cut off his own arm before his enemy could do it. Now he thought Midoriya had another scheme. Midoriya was in crippling agony and struggling to breathe. In that state, a normal person would cling to life, but Midoriya was not a normal person. Then he declared that as long as it took, he would continue destroying Midoriya, the country, and everything. The two clashed again, with Midoriya intending to pass gear shift to Shigaraki, while Shigaraki sought to kill Midoriya. As Midoriya drew closer, he used the smokescreen of the sixth user, which surprised N, because he thought he was the most useless now. At the same time, Shigaraki said all he needed was a single dose of decay. No matter what Midoriya planned, he would have to defend, and as he spoke, he touched the ground to spread his decay. To his shock, Midoriya lifted the ground around him with black chain. Shigaraki could not believe Midoriya had managed to keep his decay from spreading, and wondered when he had grabbed such a massive chunk of earth. Then Banjo explained that this happened when Midoriya was blasted away by Shigaraki's earlier attack. He had shot strands of black chain underground and carved up the earth itself to prepare for the next round. Shigaraki realized it was similar to Yuei's anti-decay strategy, and Shinomori's danger sense triggered, making him look back. He grabbed what was coming at him, only to realize it was just Midoriya's cape. For N, he realized it was the same decoy tactic Midoriya had used back in the sniper battle against Lady Nagant. Back to Shigaraki. He was confused because the light his search quirk displayed was pointing to that object. His eyes widened when he realized that what it had tracked was Midoriya's blood. On top of that, he was shocked that it was not Midoriya's light at all, so he asked where Midoriya was. Then he understood what was happening, and he reached out again. However, it was too late, because Midoriya was already in front of him, ready to strike. Midoriya knew that search indicated the locations of those the user had seen. They gambled on the possibility that search would register the other successors. His intention to transfer the second user allowed the second to split off and reside in his blood. By launching that blood directly at Shigaraki, Midoriya had fallen off his radar, creating an opening for him to get close to Shigaraki's face. He had exploited the fact that Shigaraki could track him. That and the handy smokescreen made Shigaraki misjudge his position, enabling that sneak attack. N was utterly shocked because he realized then how much Midoriya truly admired every quirk. Meanwhile, Shigaraki's body began to reject the incoming attack, instinctively entering the absolute defense form, as seen in the fingers surrounding him. He knew he could not afford to take that hit. But before he could grab Midoriya, Midoriya punched him powerfully in the chest, successfully transferring the second user of One for All. Then Kudo told Midoriya not to let the weight of passing him on to Shigaraki burden him, because he was only ever a phantom. His mind and will had already transferred to Shigaraki, but before they could be used, he would destroy the scar on his soul. As a result, Shigaraki's reaction made it clear he felt the pain from the recoil of that attack. Unexpectedly, in the middle of that battle, Midoriya saw visions of when Dabi and Toga first met Shigaraki. Dabi even told Shigaraki that in person, he looked super gross, while Toga admired him for being Stain's friend and said she wanted to join his league of villains. Midoriya was confused by the visions he was seeing, and on top of that, he saw other scenes as well. He had a vision of his fight against Todoroki at the sports festival, when Todoroki told him he wanted to become a hero too. He also saw Spinner at the moment he first met Shigaraki, when Spinner said he was only there because Stain had inspired him to act. Midoriya was bewildered about why he was seeing visions of the sports festival's second-round fight against Todoroki, along with Spinner, Dabi, and Toga. Meanwhile, Yoichi realized Midoriya's memories were blending together. Then En told Midoriya not to let up. Midoriya was surprised to hear him at that moment, and En added that their plan was working, since Kudo had managed to destroy the tear in Shigaraki's soul. Still, it was not enough, so Midoriya had to continue his attack. As Midoriya continued attacking, he once again saw a vision, and this time it was of Asui and Mineta during the USJ incident. As Yoichi thought, the memories of Shigaraki and Midoriya were blending together. The resonance of One for All and All for One was building up at a rapid pace, and now, after Kudo's transfer attack, that resonance had reached a critical point. For his brother to claim One for All, he had chased after its soul, but despite the absurd power he had gained, that very soul remained with them, the vestiges. Now they were facing the mightiest villain, one clad in armor forged from untold malice and hatred. Resisting such a heinous calamity had always been the very reason they were placed within that chain of power. They were already there, and with the punch Midoriya was about to land, he would transfer the full power of One for All to Shigaraki. In the middle of all that, other events of USJ appeared, such as the release of the first Nomu encountered by Midoriya and the others. Shigaraki saw the Midoriya at that time, and Kurogiri as well. At the same time, Midoriya saw Shigaraki and Kurogiri during that period. The two of them shouted each other's names, while Shigaraki's danger sense triggered, and more fingers grew to serve as his armor. Midoriya landed another point-blank attack on Shigaraki's stomach, and the vestiges prepared to enter and destroy the tear in his soul. They all rushed into that tear at once, but most of them were rejected, and only one managed to get through. The vestiges of One for All returned to Midoriya, and he was surprised that it had happened that way. However, he saw that his attack had still done damage. Banjo explained that Shigaraki had rejected them, and they should have known it would happen, considering how strong Shigaraki's will was to claim one of them. The only one who managed to slip through was the sixth user, and barely at that. They all needed to thank him for that latest damage. Midoriya then realized that this meant Shigaraki could not completely shut himself away. If only the growing hands and fingers could receive the transfer, but no. That attempt had only succeeded when he broke through the fingers and struck Shigaraki's chest. Transferring through the fingers would not work, because they were like dead nails or a layer of grime. Then he saw a vision of a boy accompanied by a man in a suit. Midoriya realized that was the young Shigaraki taken in by All for One. Because of that, he felt even more driven in their plan, and vowed they would try as many times as it took. Then the two prepared to face off again, with Midoriya readying his black whip and Shigaraki surrounding himself with even more fingers. Meanwhile, we see a drone broadcasting the fight between the two from a distance. Someone commented that it was made possible through super long-range remote control thanks to satellite uplinks. UA boasts peak performance, even when it's on the fritz. We then learned that the one speaking was Hatsume from the support team, who added that it was this particular drone that had informed Midoriya that his gauntlets were finished. That drone had even had its own crash landing, which she had retooled to be sturdier than ever. She bragged to La Brava that Midoriya was her valued client, so if she wanted to provide excellent service in the future, she should observe carefully. La Brava responded that Midoriya was the same boy who had imprisoned her beloved Gentle, and somehow that had helped him become even more amazingly, wonderfully stupendous. At the same time, UA was slowly crashing into the ocean, and Cementos was struggling to prevent it from happening. Gentle arrived to offer his help, and Cementos told him to assist the injured and report if anyone could not walk on their own. He added that it was shameful not to help, indirectly criticizing the students who were only recording videos. There were also other students simply watching the battle on their phones, shocked at what was happening. At the evacuation center, people were also watching the ongoing fight, while Eri was seen running towards somewhere, only to be stopped by the pro-hero Ectoplasm, who told her not so fast. Midoriya attacked Shigaraki once again, and that was the reason Eri ran away. When Ectoplasm stopped her, she told him that she needed to help Deku, also known as Midoriya. Ectoplasm explained that Midoriya was far too far from them, but Eri insisted that she could ride in the big box, the same way they had reached the evacuation shelter. Ectoplasm explained that the battles against Dabi, Makia, and All for One were far more destructive than expected and had damaged even their evacuation system, so returning was no longer possible. Eri still tried to make excuses, but Ectoplasm cut her off, saying her rewind energy had not yet been replenished. That meant rushing to Midoriya would be fruitless. He told her that she already knew this after seeing Eraser. He said he understood painfully what Eri was feeling, but all they could do now was keep the faith. Eri then remembered when Midoriya asked her if she had a dream. When she told him, Midoriya said that because of that, he wanted to try extra hard himself. Because of this, Eri began to cry, but someone took her hand and asked if she remembered how Midoriya was always about to burst out crying. It was none other than Kota, the boy Midoriya had saved from Muscular. Eri was surprised to see Kota, who said that he too was a crybaby like Midoriya, and whenever he saw him fighting so hard, he felt like he needed to act as well. Alongside the two of them, another person in the evacuation center looked anxious and remembered asking Midoriya if, once he could rest back at UA, they would all be able to return to their normal lives. That person grew even more anxious as they watched every passing second of the fight. Midoriya had answered them back then that everyone was together with him, so yes, they would all be able to return to their old lives. The heroes would restore everything. At the crash site of UA, all the heroes and students were being evacuated to safety. Monoma from Class 1B was being carried on a stretcher, while Kaminari was being supported by Yaoyorozu, and the two of them were watching the battle on a phone. Kaminari realized that Midoriya had once again taken on his dark form, and as he kept watching, he began to cry more. Then he called out to Yaoyorozu, whom he called Momoyo. He said that in comics and such, there were characters who would cheer on their companions. Usually, it was a buddy on the sidelines shouting encouragement, like him or Kirishima. Yaoyorozu apologized, saying she had not consumed such particular works of fiction, so Kaminari asked if she was not much of a shonen reader. Kaminari then said that Midoriya was probably the strongest guy in the world right now, so why did he not feel that everything would be okay? Just like the way All Might had inspired everyone. Then he asked if his anxiety and worry meant that he did not trust Midoriya, and as he asked this, tears streamed down his face. Then we shifted to Gungjie Villa, where a chopper arrived, and Asui was crying. A reporter reported that there was a woman there in seriously bad condition. The reporter referred to her as Gravity something, and they were referring to Uraraka. The reporter forgot her exact name, but said again that she is the girl from UA, and that the chopper would arrive there soon. At the wasteland where All for One's battle took place, the reporter's colleague mentioned that UA robots were on their way. Someone else added that the Gravity Girl might not pull through, while another person said they had received a live feed of Midoriya, and it is looking crazy. Another person dismissed that, saying to forget about it and focus on those in need of help. Then Hawks, who was among the heroes there, realized that the Gravity Girl being referred to was Uravity, also known as Uraraka. He remembered her as the girl who gave a speech at UA, and he recalled his desire for everyone to see each other united as one. The fight between the two continued, and at the Central Hospital, Lady Nagant and Rock Lock were watching. Lady Nagant asked Rock Lock if he had asked her why she had followed Midoriya. She said it was because Midoriya had wrenched open her heart. He had a special way of doing that, and there was nothing harder for a villain to bear than that. Rock Lock replied that defeating villains was all about making them lose the will to fight. Lady Nagant responded that she believed she knew what Midoriya was doing, which surprised Rock Lock. Lady Nagant said that Midoriya was not merely out to punish evil, like it's all black and white. His dream was to take down Shigaraki through a thornier, more nuanced path. She added that the look on Midoriya's face when he was up against the wall and running rugged gave people the strength to risk everything to support him. Lady Nagant's words proved true, because at the evacuation center, where many civilians were watching, someone cheered that Midoriya could defeat Shigaraki. Then we returned to the battle between the two, where Shigaraki told Midoriya to get away from him, as he tried to reach out and attack with Decay. At the same time, Shigaraki had a flash of memory of his father telling him to stop killing his family. As Midoriya's punch was about to land on Shigaraki, he suddenly saw himself standing in front of the Shimura family household and remembered Shigaraki's own words that all destruction began from that home. In the next scene, Midoriya managed to break through Shigaraki's thick finger armor, resulting in a massive explosion and the release of beams of light. Because of this, Hatsume's broadcasting drone was blasted away, causing people to wonder what was happening in the battle. Some did not know what was going on, while others noticed that it looked like Izuku Midoriya had bulldozed his way through the blob of fingers. That man was correct, because that was exactly what Midoriya had done, and now he looked normal again. He was no longer wrapping Black Whip around his body, and we could see that he landed another direct punch on Shigaraki. Shigaraki's reaction showed how much pain that attack had caused him at his core, damaged by the vestiges like a meteor that created a massive crater on the earth. However, Nana Shimura was left behind in the realm of the vestiges, and she was shook to her core. She searched for the other former one for all users, but Yoichi, Bruce, Banjo, and even Tashinori, also known as All Might, were gone. She wondered why she was the only one repelled, then recalled Shigaraki's words when he said he hated her with all his heart. She also remembered the tears of her son Kotaro Shimura, begging her not to leave him. She realized then that it was not because Shigaraki truly hated her, but because of her own weakness. Then we returned to the vision scene by Midoriya. He was standing in front of the Shimura family house, wearing his school uniform. He was about to press the doorbell, when suddenly someone asked him what would happen if he learned more about Shigaraki's past. When he turned around, he saw himself wearing his superhero suit, glitching and surrounded by a dark aura. That figure asked if anything would change if Shigaraki's past was exposed. Midoriya realized that it was Shigaraki's perspective of him, and he thought Shigaraki was using that form to speak to him. He replied to his dark form that he did not know if things would change, but it would not sit right with him for it to end without learning the past. Shigaraki, in the form of Midoriya, then asked what if he simply died, but Midoriya told him that he would allow him to enter. Right after saying that, a truck suddenly appeared and looked like it was going to run him over. He jumped aside, but the driver shouted at him to get off the road and asked where his parents were. He then noticed that his bag had been hit, and he was surprised to find there was physical interaction in that space. Then Nana Shimura told him that he had delved deep into Shigaraki's subconscious, and as a successor himself, his thoughts were taking solid form there, so both he and Shigaraki could affect each other physically. Midoriya was shocked to see Nana, who added that she had once again been repelled, so she apologized. Midoriya told her not to apologize, because he was happy that she was still with him in that battle. Hearing that lessened the sadness on Nana's face. Then she told Midoriya to think of that space as Shigaraki's core, his origin. That was Shigaraki at his most delicate and malleable, and in that place, he was likely to be fragile. There, Midoriya could reach out and strike directly at Shigaraki's origin, and as she said that, the Midoriya form taken by Shigaraki vanished. Meanwhile, Midoriya charged forward, keeping Nana's words in mind that this was Shigaraki's origin. At that moment, suddenly Stain appeared above Midoriya and pinned him down. He told Midoriya that this was the reason why he would die. Stain stabbed him in the arm, then suddenly changed form. He became Redestro, who asked what burdens Midoriya carried and what he sought to build. Then Kai Chisaki, also known as Overhaul, emerged from Redestro's face and asked if Midoriya had a plan. All of these were, of course, just Shigaraki changing forms to mentally confuse Midoriya. Midoriya answered that he had no plan and told Shigaraki to get out of his way. He managed to push past Shigaraki's distracting forms, and when he opened a door, he was met with a picture of Nana Shimura embracing her son, Kotaro Shimura, Shigaraki's father. It was the same picture shown to Shigaraki by his older sister, Hana Shimura, when he was a child. As that memory played out, both Midoriya and Nana were shocked, and Nana was even more stunned to realize that Kotaro had kept that picture. Hana had even said at the time that she and Shigaraki should become a brother-sister hero duo, but they had to hide it from their father. When Nana and Midoriya stepped inside that door, they saw Kotaro hurting the silhouette of a child. Both of them were shocked by what they saw, so Midoriya rushed forward to protect the child, thinking that must have been Shigaraki back when he was still Tenko Shimura. However, some force pushed him back, and he realized that Shigaraki was rejecting him again. He was bounced away, even though he was just a stone's throw away. Meanwhile, Kotaro told Tenko that the grandmother he saw in the picture shown by Hana was not really his grandmother, but a monster who abandoned her child. Nana then broke down in tears, realizing that Kotaro had not kept the picture because he wanted to, but because he could not part with it. At the same time, Kotaro asked Tenko if he really wanted to know what heroes were. He said they were people who hurt their own families just to help complete strangers. In Nana's mind, she realized that all that time, her son had been unable to part with that picture, and the scars she had inflicted on him had been passed down to her grandson, Shigaraki. She thought that if only she had defeated All for One and returned home to her son, none of this would have happened. Because of that, Nana had fully broken down, apologizing to Kotaro, just as Kotaro was about to strike Tenko again. This was because she was weak. At the same time, Midoriya told Nana to enter Shigaraki, while he prepared to transfer the 7th user. Together, the two of them managed to break through the barrier, with Nana stopping Kotaro from hitting Tenko, while Midoriya jumped to push Tenko out of the way. At that moment, Nana and Kotaro began to vanish, with Nana apologizing to Kotaro for not being able to return home to him. She also apologized to Tenko, saying she was to blame for what Kotaro had become, and she hated it. At that same time, Tenko regained his physical appearance, and Midoriya saw him embracing his dog, Mon, at the exact moment when his decay ability awakened. Tenko told Mon that he hated everyone, and Midoriya was watching. He realized that this was the same thing he had sensed in the Gunga. Then he ran toward Tenko, but that was when Tenko's decay began. Midoriya's eyes widened as he saw Tenko's quirk decay his own dog into dust, leaving behind nothing but a pool of blood. Tenko was also shocked to see his dog turn into a pool of blood, and that was when Midoriya realized this must have been the first time Tenko's decay quirk had emerged. Then Hana arrived, and she had something to say to Tenko. Midoriya already knew what the outcome of that event would be, because what would happen next was the very core of everything. Hana screamed in fear at what she saw, and Tenko cried as he ran toward her, reaching out for her. However, another child stopped him, a younger version of Midoriya, and Midoriya knew he had to end this fight. Because of that, his hands began to decay, and he knew they were in a realm where memories materialized. That was why he forced himself to visualize and picture himself not letting go of Tenko. He reminded himself of those hands, saying all of One for All had smashed against Shigaraki with those very hands. Meanwhile, Tenko asked him why he was doing this. Midoriya answered that it was because he had seen him crying, and that the last piece to set right against Shigaraki would be himself. Tenko said that everything Midoriya was saying was wrong, because he had chosen to do it. It was his choice to destroy his house and his family. Otherwise, what would be the point of those hands? Who else would ever validate his existence, given the way he was? At that moment, Midoriya was rejected by Shigaraki. Overwhelmed by the huge surge of emotions from his child form, Tenko, Midoriya then remembered Nana Shimura's words that in Shigaraki's current state, he was at his most delicate and malleable form. According to Midoriya, on one hand, powerful hatred and catharsis were weighed against grief and confusion. Tenko was still wavering on the edge at that point. Then Tenko told Midoriya to let him go, and he recalled how everyone had abandoned him after he killed his entire family. People even avoided his gaze. Meanwhile, Midoriya remembered when he had told the vestiges that there might be no other way besides killing Shigaraki, and he did not know what to do when that time came. Then he noticed that Shigaraki's massive hatred was beginning to crack. So he told him that others had already reached out to hold his hand and had given him peace. That was when Ida had held his hand back when he went rogue and fought against the entirety of Class 1A. Tenko began to fade away, and Midoriya told him that he was there to hold his hand. Everything around them vanished, leaving only the two of them kneeling with their heads close together in the middle of a void. Then Tenko remembered another memory, set in a playground. He was playing with his childhood friends, Mikan and Tomo. They told him to be all might in their game, which made him smile. But that smile quickly faded, because as quickly as that memory started, it also faded away and they returned to the void. Tenko said he did not want to be All Might, because he was a villain. He fought in the name of evil, to destroy. Then the League of Villains appeared beside them, and Tenko changed into Shigaraki's form. He told Midoriya that it did not matter if he stamped out his hatred. Even if he ended up hollow, the villains still needed their own hero. Around the world, there were people supporting Shigaraki, wanting him to kill Midoriya. One man even said that Shigaraki should crush that rotten world. He should destroy everything. In the broadcast, we could see the fingers of Shigaraki crumbling away. The counterforce reported it, but they could no longer see Midoriya. Then another memory appeared before the two. Kotaro Shimura was stopped on the sidewalk, and he recognized the man from Koga Construction. Shigaraki was shocked to see this, and was confused by the memory. The man asked Kotaro how his old back pain was, and Kotaro answered that it got a little worse every year. The man asked if he wanted a recommendation for a decent doctor, but Kotaro declined, saying it was not worth the trouble. They also saw another memory of Kotaro drinking, where he said that Tenko was a handful. Because of that, Shigaraki asked what memory that was. Then the man asked Kotaro about his son's quirk, but Kotaro replied that he did not have one yet. Midoriya was confused, because that was not Tenko's memory, so he asked whose memory it was. Then the ground where Shigaraki and Midoriya stood transformed into a giant head, none other than All for One, who devoured Shigaraki. All for One called Shigaraki such a foolish vessel, saying he had lost the battle of wills to a child, Midoriya, an absolute nobody. He said that Shigaraki desired strength, but he was pathetically weak. He even called him by his real name, Tenko Shimura, and called him a pathetic imbecile, because not once in his pitiful life had he made any choice that was his. As he said this, his body formed from the rubble, while Midoriya was falling. All for One looked at Midoriya and berated him for destroying his One for All and for his brother Yuichi. He also said that because of Tenko's spiritual defeat in his own subconscious realm, it allowed his consciousness to claw back control. Then he turned his attention to Shigaraki, calling him Tenko Shimura. As Shigaraki began to fade away, All for One called him such a pure, credulous superego, a soft simpleton who could not relinquish his cretinous life. He said Shigaraki benefited from his guidance every step of the way, but it amounted to nothing. For Shigaraki, he had no idea what his master was saying, because he had chosen the path he had taken. All for One replied that as he had already mentioned, not one of Shigaraki's choices had ever been his own. He explained that he made Shigaraki think they were his own decisions, otherwise his strength would have been stunted. It was crucial that Shigaraki's illusion of free will was twisted around. Then All for One revealed that from his encounters with Daigoro Banjo, also known as Lariat, and Enteitai, also known as Smoke Eater, he had learned that stealing One for All back would require strength of will even greater than that of the wielder. When he was on the defensive against All Might, he conducted a search for a soul that could one day grind away at his spiritual fortitude. He called it a quest for the most powerful emotions, one born from suppression of the heart, a primordial urge. What he sought was a seabed fertile enough to grow hatred. Then he recalled a memory when he said to Kotaro that during those times, heroes never showed up when they were truly needed, so children needed siblings because no one would help them. Shigaraki was shocked because All for One was talking about his father. All for One added that the eldest child, Hana, was already too far gone, and he could not risk overstepping. He only nudged slightly from the shadows. He said he removed the yet unknown quirk factor Shigaraki had inherited from his parents. Then he said he had encouraged Kotaro's strict ways while also giving Shigaraki something to aspire to, all while biding his time. He revealed that when he saw Shigaraki out on the street, he disguised himself as an old man and told him that the road ahead was dangerous because of traffic. He then invited Shigaraki to hold his hand, while secretly transferring the decay quirk to him. He said he had sourced that quirk from one of the good doctor's facilities. They had removed half of its ability, the half that could reverse its effects, leaving behind an incomplete, subpar copy engineered solely to promote destruction. That was the very quirk he had given Shigaraki. Shigaraki struggled to process his master's revelations, as All for One declared that tragedy, ordeals, rejection, and validation were all his doing. Shigaraki's body shattered within his own mind as the memories of those he killed with decay and those he had fought flashed before him. At the same time, All for One told him that his entire being was created by him, and that his so-called unwavering heart was worthless. All for One told him to vacate the body, because to him, Shigaraki's spirit was his to delete. He said he had been saving that as his last resort until Shigaraki managed to steal one for all, but that was no longer in the cards. Then Midoriya called out to All for One as he himself was being rejected from the mindscape, and they returned to reality. All for One had also returned, and he said that Yoichi, his brother, was gone. He now had full control of Shigaraki's body, and he added that his intermediate goal had been foiled. At the same time, he heard a lingering note inside his head, so he created his own version of Shigaraki's stuffed tandem and told the lingering noise to stay quiet. Then he inspected Shigaraki's body, which was now his vessel, and noticed that the spiritual damage had taken a toll on the flesh. The decay was gone, as was Shigaraki's rage and hatred. The vessel he had spent years cultivating was now ruined, and even his brother was gone, leaving only himself. He then asked Midoriya if he was dead, but of course he was not, because Midoriya called out to him. All for One said he would move on to his hollow, immaterial final goal, which was to conquer the world, but Midoriya told him he would not allow it. At the same time, Midoriya tried to stand, but he suddenly collapsed because both of his arms were severed and bleeding. All for One saw this and commented that neither of them had emerged unscathed. Despite that, Midoriya forced himself to stand, remembering that it had happened because he reached out to Shigaraki the same way Ida had once reached out to him. He also remembered that his hands had healed before, so he forced himself to believe it was not over. He shouted this at All for One, who replied that loss engendered strength, and that was the narrative he wanted to establish. Such a pitiful end was inevitable for a boy who had nothing to lose from the beginning. As he said this, he prepared to strike. However, Sero arrived just in time to stop the attack, wrapping All for One with his tape. Midoriya was shocked to see Sero, while All for One realized that Midoriya's presence had obscured his danger sense warnings. Meanwhile, Sero greeted Midoriya and jokingly asked if he needed some saving. Then Midoriya's eyes widened even more in shock when Ojiro and Sato also arrived. The two of them used their ultimate moves on All for One, Ojiro with Tornado Tail Dance and Sato with Sugar Knuckle. Both of them gave it their all in those attacks, while Midoriya was overjoyed to see that the three of them were still alive. On top of that, more reinforcements arrived through Kurogiri's warp, and he called out to Midoriya. It was none other than Eraserhead, Midoriya's teacher, who apologized for the delay. In the next scene, we go back to the past, and we learn that shortly after Kurogiri warped Present Mike and Eraserhead away after they fell from UA, the three realized they were floating in the middle of the ocean on a tiny rock island. Present Mike tried to wake Kurogiri and asked where they were. He said their comms were dead, so they were in the dark about the war. Then he remembered Kurogiri saying he was Tamura Shigaraki's protector, which only infuriated him more. Because of that, was about to punch Kurogiri while telling him he had picked a great time to malfunction, so he had better wake up. He also recalled telling Kurogiri that if he was not Shirakumo, then do them a favor and fade away, but leave them his memories. Because of that, he said they should not have placed their fate in Kurogiri's hands. Relying on that corpse to save them had been a bad idea all along. Eraserhead stopped Present Mike from punching Kurogiri because he said he could see tears. Present Mike thought Eraserhead meant him, so he denied it and said he was a manly man, but Eraserhead clarified he meant Kurogiri. Present Mike answered that it was raining, so what Eraserhead saw were not tears. The corpse with them was a Nomu, and it had removed Eraserhead from the playing field because he fought Shigaraki. It had already happened twice, and that was the end of the story. Their priority now was to switch on the Nomu so they could return to the fight. Once they did, he would beat Kurogiri until he stayed down for good. Then he called Eraserhead by his real name, Aizawa, and said that as far as spoils of war went, they had gotten a darkened dud here, so he should forget the little miracle that happened at Tartarus. They were 31 now, no longer the schoolboys of Class 2A at UA. Eraserhead said that was true, but when Shirakumo died, he was a UA student. Then he tried speaking to Shirakumo inside Kurogiri and asked why he was not tearing them to pieces with warp gates or dropping them to their deaths. Present Mike was in agony in that moment, because he knew Eraserhead was talking to Shirakumo, while Eraserhead gripped Kurogiri's head tightly. At that moment, Kurogiri suddenly spoke and said he needed to protect Shigaraki. Then Shirakumo emerged and asked where Shigaraki was. Where they were, and realized that the ones in front of him were his friends. Eraserhead said that at Tartarus, they had reached towards Shirakumo and drawn out a bit of light. However, darkness worked differently, and that was what reactivated Kurogiri. He said he knew that Present Mike, whom he called Yamada, knew that they were educators in the hero course, and their job was to make sure UA students reach graduation. He thought that was where Shirakumo's origin lies. Then Kurogiri unleashed a massive puff of smoke and called Present Mike by his real name, Yamada. That was when Present Mike realized his friend Shirakumo was still inside Kurogiri, which made him cry outright, and he said those memories would not fade. Then we moved to the police center, where a call was ringing on the comms, and La Brava noticed it. Someone was calling Tsukauchi, and it turned out to be Eraserhead, who was asked by Tsukauchi where he had come from. Eraserhead asked whether Monoma could still fight, but Tsukauchi said Monoma had been carted off for urgent treatment after a nasty blow to the head. Eraserhead said that in that case, give him updates on each theater of battle and on all available personnel with their exact coordinates. Tsukauchi was puzzled by the request, but immediately complied. In the next scene, we moved to the UA evacuation shelter, where Eraserhead arrived and Ectoplasm saw him. Ectoplasm asked how Eraserhead had gotten there, and Eraserhead explained that they had used Kurogiri. He said Kurogiri was on standby with Present Mike outside the grounds, and he ordered Ectoplasm to gather the heroes assigned to the evacuation and protection mission. Only leave those best suited for defense. Ectoplasm was shocked that Kurogiri could be used, because he had thought Kurogiri could not be won over. Eraserhead replied that there was no telling how long their hold would last, so Ectoplasm needed to move now. People in the evacuation shelter overheard them and turned their heads, while the pro-hero Death Arms volunteered to join. A boy also volunteered, saying he was a nobody but still a hero. Eraserhead told them to head to the main entrance. Besides them, there was a man who took off his shirt and asked Eraserhead to give it to an injured hero. Eraserhead accepted it and saw that other civilians were offering items that could help, so he thanked them. We learned that most of the battles had been won by that point, so they would reach out to anyone who could still fight. One battle that had not yet ended was at National Takoba Arena. The escaped prisoner, there was a notorious criminal known for wide-ranging devastation and battles of attrition. That was Gashly Ijiju. They warped there, and the fight ended instantly. After that battle, all that remained was to divide and conquer Phase 3. After that, we returned to the present, where many warp gates appeared on the battlefield of Midoriya versus All for One, like a scene out of Avengers Endgame. All for One mocked them, asking if they had come to get their quirk stolen. Midoriya was shocked that his teacher was there, and Eraserhead told him to keep still. Eraserhead also asked how long it had been since Midoriya lost his arms. Midoriya answered that he was not sure how much time had passed in the subconscious space he had been in. Then he thought that Shigaraki had taken over All for One, back at UA at the floating tomb. All for One had boasted about overcoming Shigaraki's resistance and achieving a perfect fusion of the two. When it was Shigaraki's turn, it did not work that way. All for One got swallowed up and disappeared. So he thought that smashing Tenko's spirit would surely break both Shigaraki and All for One. So how was All for One still fighting? While he was thinking that, Eraserhead brought out a horn. Then we went back to the past, where Eri approached Eraserhead and called him Aizawa. Eraserhead was shocked by what Eri was holding, as she cried and said the teachers would not let her go to the scary battle. She knew why she could not go, but she asked Eraserhead to give Midoriya the horn she had removed from her forehead. He asked why she had broken her horn and how. Eri answered that she had asked for and gotten some help. Eraserhead got angry at Ectoplasm for letting that happen, so he apologized, but he explained that Eri had learned a lot from Eraserhead about rational and irrational actions. Eri said Eraserhead and the teachers had helped her learn about her power, and what Eraserhead needed to do was use it, because that piece was part of her. Eraserhead answered that it was a rough way to go about it, because Eri might have damaged her quirk for good. Eri said she wanted to help All Might and Bakugo, whom she called Kachan, but she could not. She added that her dream was to sing like Jiro at the school festival. She said Deku and his friends did all that fun stuff with her, so after everything ended, she wanted to sing for them. She knew it would not help a lot, but she asked Eraserhead to let her fight as well, so he used it in the present by stabbing it into Midoriya, which restored his arms. In a flashback, Ectoplasm said the accumulated energy was lacking to a nearly useless extent. Any target would be rewound slowly and not by a great amount of time. However, it might still give someone 2 or 3 minutes of rewind. Eraserhead said Midoriya could not be allowed to die until he heard Eri sing, so Midoriya started to cry. Others said they felt the same, like they were already down for the count. Then they learned that Midoriya was still fighting, so they brought themselves there. The ones speaking were his Class 1A classmates, Kota, Shoji, Kaminari, Yaoyorozu, and Mineta. Midoriya was stunned to see them, while All for One prepared to attack. The rest of Class 1A also arrived, along with the pro heroes, fellow students from UA, students from Shiketsu, and anyone else who could help, as they all announced that they are here. Kirishima greeted his classmates jokingly, saying it was funny to see them there. Shoji replied, "Right back at you." Kota added that the police had asked for help from anyone who could still fight, which was why they came, while Mina said they had heard that Aizawa-sensei had managed to win over Kurogiri. Meanwhile, Aoyama and Hagakure both remained silent, while Kaminari and Yaoyorozu said that when they saw Midoriya still fighting, they decided to join as well. For Asui, she said whatever it takes, as long as she was still conscious. Jiro then said she had come that far for victory and would not back down. Then Mineta, already in tears, said that imagining not taking a real stand there made him question why anyone would even dream of being a hero. What was the point of it then? Because of all that, Midoriya cried at the words of his classmates. Meanwhile, All for One watched as all the heroes entered the battlefield, and he called them an array of dull, ashen flesh. He knew that as an integrated part of Tomura Shigaraki, he should have shattered into pieces along with him. However, when he heard the sound of Yoichi break into nothing, all the colors faded away from his world. His obsession disappeared, leaving only a gaping hole of loss. A chasm that no strike could reach, one that allowed him to avoid the death blow. Then he called out to Izuku Midoriya and told him that tragedy engenders true strength, and did he not agree? At the same time, he unleashed multiple dangerous quirks from his arms. Sero answered that he did not know about that, because unlike the others, his life was not filled with wild highs and tragic lows. What pushed him forward was simply not wanting to fall behind in the next practical exam or whatever. As he charged forward, he pointed out someone who had gone through tough times, saying the guy used to look all zonked out and empty. He added that anyone was better off not going through all that miserable tragic crap. At the same time, Endeavor and Todoroki appeared on opposite sides of All for One, and together used Flashfire Fist. It caused a powerful explosion across the battlefield. Then we went back to the past, to the battle at Gunga Villa, where Recovery Girl had been treating the injured all day and might not have had any strength left. Natsuo told Endeavor that his mother and Fuyumi had endured enough heat for one day, so he should leave with Todoroki, assuming they had any strength left at all. Sero carried the father and son while telling them his thoughts when he had heard they had defeated Dabi. After that, we returned to the present, where Present Mike also arrived, and thanked his friend Shirakumo for teleporting them there. He said that all able bodies were now gathered, and that day marked a turning point. One last big job, he shouts as they all charge forward. All for One prepared to attack and called his opponents a legion of the wounded, saying they were nothing but desperate heroes. He said he felt nothing, only forlorn, so these cut-rate heroes were mere afterthoughts compared to All Might. Just as All for One was about to attack, 13 intervened, riding with Hound Dog, and used Black Hole against him. From the front, Gang Orca attacked with his Ursinus, supported by Shishacross Meatballs. All for One called them dust to sweep away and countered their attacks. Because of that, Burnin, one of the pro heroes under Endeavor's pro agency, ordered her comrades to divert All for One's assault. Amidst all the chaos, the heroes were having trouble with the speed of All for One, because it would take dozens of them just to stop one of his attacks. They were not fighting on even terms. Kendo then said they must not let All for One split them up and had to fight as a cohesive unit. Then Midoriya stood up, his arms restored, but suddenly dropped to his knees because of the pain in his body. Eraserhead told him he had only been rewound a few minutes back, to the point before he lost his arms. He had been fighting non-stop, so his injuries were still there. The damage from the long, brutal battle had not gone away. Then Midoriya revealed that he had given up one for all, shocking Eraserhead. Eraserhead even asked if it was gone, and Midoriya said the quirks from each wielder were no longer with him. However, even though one for all did not stay with him long, it had taken root in his quirkless self, so just like it was for All Might, the ember of one for all still remained with him. As long as that ember was inside him, All for One would have to deal with him, so he stood up again. Eraserhead called out to him and gave him medicine, bandages, and clothes provided earlier by the civilians. He told Midoriya that was courtesy of the refugees, and Midoriya immediately recognized that the shirt was from the men's non-no brand Series 5, one-size t-shirt. Then Aoyama took his hand and told him they should run. He said they needed Midoriya's strength just as much as he needed theirs. In a flashback, Midoriya remembered the time he had offered his hand to Aoyama, which brought him to tears. At the same time, people at the evacuation shelter were cheering for him, saying they would fight by his side. Among those cheering were the man who had given his shirt to Eraserhead, Eri, Koda, Gran Torino, and other people watching the live broadcast. Midoriya ran forward to charge at All for One, carrying with him the hope and encouragement of the people, just like his master and idol, All Might. In the middle of Aoyama and Midoriya's charge, Aoyama was blasted back by All for One's attack, which made Midoriya worry about him, but Aoyama told him to keep running. Meanwhile, Eraserhead called out to Shirakumo, but when he saw him, he was stunned as Kurogiri's body, which he was inhabiting, began to slowly disintegrate. While that was happening, Midoriya continued his charge, as every hero gave their best against All for One's attacks. The heroes also tried to return fire, but nothing was working. Vlad King even mentioned that All for One was too tough. Kami from Shiketsu said that unlike All for One, their opponent was not falling for her rage bait illusions. Then Eraserhead gave the order to carve a direct path to All for One, who they still believed was Shigaraki. All for One said that his Omni-Factor Unleash was not the direct result of giving in to base emotion. Rather, that augmentation was him exercising control and authority over his myriad of powers. Therefore, they should not presume that they outnumbered him. After saying this, he released a major laser attack combined with spikes, aimed at Midoriya. However, Hagakure jumped in to refract the laser. Midoriya was shocked to see her, and Hagakure said that when it came to laser-like stuff, she was the girl for the job. At the same time, Yaoyorozu formed an electromagnetic railgun. Along with Kaminari, they prepared their attack, and together they launched a major blast attack at All for One. Because of that, All for One called them insolent and retaliated with his own attacks. Midoriya told him to leave his friends alone as he prepared to strike using the bit of one for all left inside him. But to his surprise, a multitude of UA students jumped in front of him to protect him and block All for One's attacks. Ojiro told Midoriya that he was already on his last legs, so he should save his strength, while Sato said that only Midoriya's power could defeat All for One, so he should let them take those hits. Then Asui and Shoji lifted Midoriya, telling him to go on. Since the rest of them were not agile enough to weave past such brutal attacks, the two of them would carry him partway there. At the same time, at the evacuation shelter, Asui's family was watching her and cheering for her, while Shoji was being cheered on by the girl he had saved before. Back on the battlefield, Asui and Shoji launched Midoriya forward, and he thanked them. As soon as Midoriya landed, it looked like something was going to strike him, but Kirishima, Mina, and Fatgum arrived, saying they would show their guts to protect Midoriya. Kirishima and Mina were recognized by their middle school classmates, while both of them told Midoriya that he could defeat All for One, so he should get it done. This gave Midoriya even more strength, and he shouted that he would defeat All for One. Meanwhile, the arrogant All for One wondered why the heroes in front of him were not dying yet, since to him, they were just carcasses soon to be carrion. He said that in the weary movements of the heroes, there was only a little life, but persistence still shone in their eyes. Then he recalled mocking Midoriya in the Vestige Realm, where Midoriya always found himself watching helplessly. He told him it had been a mistake to pass one for all on to him. At that moment, All for One finally realized that Midoriya was the reason the heroes kept charging forward despite being battered. It was because of his weakness, the weakness that even All Might lacked. That weak and feeble strength was what gave power to the heroes, whom he called vermin, to stand back up so doggedly. He said it would not perish as long as Midoriya continued to move forward. He raised his hand to strike again, but blood poured from a hole in his hand, shocking him. Meanwhile, Midoriya continued his charge, encouraged by Gentle, who told him to do his utmost best and helped him with an air trampoline. Death Arms also gave him encouragement, shouting, "You can do this," as did Tokoyami, all the way from Gunga Villa. At the outskirts of the battle, Ethan Drive and the American soldiers found All Might and Edgeshot. Ethan said he thought their ejector seats had been disabled, but here they were. He asked if All Might had done that, and All Might replied that the kids were hoping for absolute victory, so he had chosen to minimize their losses. Ethan said that was rich coming from All Might. Then All Might raised his hand and said that when Midoriya had dived into the fray, his body had taken action too. Ever since that day, Midoriya had become his greatest hero, and he raised his bulked-up fist to his hero for the last time. Back at the battlefield, Ida asked Midoriya if he remembered their first day when they were leaving school. At that moment, he finally understood what Uraraka had meant. Then we were brought to the chopper carrying Uraraka, where Pixie Bob told her to hold on tight, because they were close to the hospital. She said she could hold on because everyone was doing their best to fight. Uraraka thought of Midoriya, recalling that she had once told him that his name, Deku, just screams "do your best." She admitted that she kind of liked that. So even though she was incredibly weak now, she told him to do his best. Meanwhile, in America, the president ordered that all their heroes be sent to Japan immediately. His subordinate replied that if All for One won, it would jeopardize their national security. The president answered that he did not care and to just do it, because he could hear the heroes of Japan calling to him. All the public's trust was now with Midoriya, just like their faith had once been with All Might, and they cheered for him. Among them were Tsukauchi, Gran Torino, Eri, Tiger, Rhodey, Melissa Shield, Koda, and other civilians watching. Of course, also there was the most important person to Midoriya, his mother, and while crying she told him to do his best. At the same time, Midoriya reached All for One and smashed him straight in the chest. Because of Midoriya's massive attack, All for One wondered why he had not noticed that hyper-regeneration was no longer functioning in the haggard excuse of a body that was Shigaraki's. He thought something should have felt off. At first, he blamed Midoriya, but then he retracted it and said that all the heroes were to blame because they had conspired against him. Each individual, he said, only represented a feeble threat, but as a united force, they had somehow overwhelmed him, dulling his sensitivity without him realizing it. He further realized that when Midoriya brought Yoichi and the other successors into Shigaraki's core, it was not only Shigaraki's spirit that had become a lost cause, but also his body. Meanwhile, Midoriya recalled his training with All Might, when he had been told that his limp noodle body was not yet ready for One for All, because his limbs would just pop off. Then he said that after only 2 years, his strength now exceeded what All Might had once been able to deliver. And what All for One now faced was the combined power of 9 users of One for All. Because of all the damage from Midoriya's One for All punch, Shigaraki's body, All for One's vessel, began to shatter. The heroes saw it, which Shindo from Ketsubutsu Academy pointed out, while Kirishima said that Midoriya had probably pulled off defeating All for One. Even as his body shattered, All for One still refused to admit defeat, so he used his quirks to repair himself. Midoriya was shocked to see it, while All for One declared that he had not yet achieved anything, and no one would ever steal what was his. He claimed only his dream would come true, and he would never pay it forward. No one would pick up his torch, because the Demon Lord was singular and absolute. He added that he only needed to repeat the process he had used on Shigaraki, whom he called a fool. He said Deku was suitable now that he no longer had One for All, but really anyone would do. He would give them his quirk and him to claim with it. He said he would make a new vessel, a new body to transfer into. But Midoriya told him he was finished, as he prepared to strike again with the remaining embers of One for All. At the same time, Eraserhead called out to Midoriya and saw Kurogiri beginning to move again. Present Mike also noticed Kurogiri's movement and was surprised. Kurogiri looked at Midoriya, who was about to strike All for One again. Then he called to erase her head and present Mike and apologized to them. He said he had to do what he must because he had to protect Tomura Shigaraki, and with that, he warped into the middle of Midoriya and All for One. Present Mike became frustrated, saying he should have known that in the end, Kurogiri would reach out with a helping hand. While he said that, Kurogiri told All for One to return Shigaraki because his friends were waiting for him. But before Kurogiri could close his warp gate, Bakugo arrived, blowing it apart with an explosion from his mouth, causing Kurogiri to dissipate. Present Mike was shocked to see Bakugo there, because he should have been in the hospital, and asked if he had zoomed back alone using his blasts. Bakugo explained that he had gotten help from Todoroki's ski jumps, and told Midoriya to not dare let him pass him. Then Midoriya told All for One that he can't look past the things he had done, but that he was not some monster beyond all understanding, nor was he a demon lord. He was simply a lonely man, and as he said this, he struck All for One. At the same time, All for One shouted at Midoriya to stop and not to look at him, but to no avail. In the next scene, we see All for One inside the Vestige Realm. There he saw the remaining embers of his brother Yoichi. Yoichi told him that Midoriya had managed to adjust that violent transfer in such a way that even the barest fragment could remain intact. He said the resonance with Midoriya's ember had awakened him to do right by those last shreds of himself. It was all for Midoriya to complete One for All, and that was what they were meant to be. All for One grabbed Yoichi and said he did not care because none of it mattered. He told Yoichi not to fade away, to show his face to him. Yoichi replied that his time had come, but All for One still refused to accept it. He said Yoichi belonged to him, so he should look at him and let him see his eyes. Yoichi said he could not guide his brother down the right path, but what Midoriya had done for them was their final salvation, the end of it all. All for One said he would not allow it, claiming he loved Yoichi like no other, that he was helpless without him. But Yoichi said it's now time for All for One to pay the price for exploiting everyone all for himself. Because Midoriya had awakened more than just him. That was because Midoriya had awakened the other previous users of One for All, along with Shigaraki, who together launched an attack on All for One from behind. With Midoriya, they delivered one last strike that finally destroyed All for One. As Midoriya and Shigaraki touched fists, Shigaraki said he thought he had been annihilated beyond hope when All for One swallowed him whole. Yet somehow he had been kept tethered by his grandmother, who had stopped him from fading away. Then he thought of Kurogiri, who was currently fading, and said he had stolen his body back from All for One, but had not destroyed anything. In the end, he might have only been a crying child, just as Midoriya had said. He admitted he could not even destroy Midoriya's hand. Midoriya replied that he could never condone everything Shigaraki had done, so that's why he fought. He wanted to stop him, and he wanted Shigaraki to stop himself, to keep grief and misery from spreading any further. Shigaraki laughed and told Midoriya that if Spinner had survived, he should tell him that to the bitter end, Tomura Shigaraki kept fighting to destroy. Midoriya responded that it had already been destroyed. At that moment, the sky cleared, and Shigaraki's body finally disintegrated into ashes. In the next scene, we move to Washington State, United States of America. The reporter Meryl Hope said their weather forecast showed clear, sunny skies across the entire country. They had anticipated a week of stormy weather, so she apologized for being so off the mark. As she spoke, the producer hoped there would be no weird outbursts. Meryl added that everyone should hold on, since they expected some strong winds. The gusts that blew that day came in the wake of a great battle, so viewers should stay tuned to see what effects might be visible from that great battle. A week had passed since that battle, and we learned that restoration efforts that had stalled after the Jaka conflict had picked back up at a breakneck pace. Now that the fighting was over, the United States and many other nations were helping with support and resources. An Egyptian pro-hero helped Cementos, and a Singaporean pro-hero named Big Red said in reports that after seeing the wild fight, they could not just sit back and do nothing. Because of Japan's fast recovery, there were homes springing up quick as bamboo, according to the children's description. Mr. Uraraka said the Survey Bureau lent them plans and blueprints so they could start rebuilding whatever was on the docket. Someone else said that before the advent of the exceptional, restoration on a similar scale would have taken a decade, But with so many capable quirks devoted to the effort, it should not be long before things go back to normal. Among the heroes helping was a hero who looked like Koichi Himawari from My Hero Academia Vigilanes. Then we went to Central Hospital. A doctor told Bakugo's parents that, as he had explained before the surgery, this was the best they could hope for Bakugo. He promised they did everything they could, especially after seeing Bakugo's exploits. Many joint segments had to be combined and set, and he could not guarantee that any amount of rehabilitation would restore Bakugo's use of his arm. If Bakugo was determined to work as a hero, he could consider a prosthesis like Mirko had before the final battle. However, Bakugo refused a prosthesis because his quirk originated from his palms. His parents cried, and he added that Midoriya did not have a prosthesis either. He shouted for them to give him rehab and to bring on the pain. The sooner the better, he even said. Even so, to his shock, the doctor forbade him from anything more than low-effort exercise for now, because besides his arm, the problem was his heart. The doctor explained that he would have died without Edshot's masterful suturing, which helped restart his heart and lungs. The doctor had no idea how Bakugo had managed to keep fighting in that state, and honestly, he was stunned that Bakugo blasted himself several kilometers after fighting in that condition. He had been given a second shot at life, and he heeded the call, so for now the only prescription from the doctor was bed rest. This left Bakugo speechless. Next, we went to the room of All Might and Midoriya. One of them asked if the other was awake. Then Midoriya asked what the odds were that they would end up side by side, and All Might said Tsukuchi had arranged it that way. The hospital lacked rooms, and this also made life easier for the guards. Then Midoriya asked All Might how he feels. All Might answered that the doctors said they had never had to use so many bolts to cobble someone back together. After that, he returned the question to Midoriya. Midoriya said he was starting to feel his arms. He added that he had failed to save Tenko Shimura's life. Even though he had reached into his heart and shattered his hatred, Tenko remained the leader of the League of Villains to the end. All Might said that as someone who had a near-death experience, he wanted Midoriya to ask himself what Tenko looked like at the end. Midoriya then remembered his last words to Tenko Shimura, also known as Tomura Shigaraki. Tenko had told him it would depend on what people decided to do tomorrow, so Midoriya should be sure to do his damn best. Back to the present, All Might said that assuming Tenko did not look like the crying kid, then Midoriya did save him, or at least his soul, and he fulfilled his duty to One for All. Then All Might asked if he did pass it on, because he had felt it. Midoriya said yes, but he still felt an ember smoldering inside. As he spoke, Bakugo entered their room and was stunned to hear it. His mother scolded him and asked why he was up and about, but he did not answer because he had not processed what he had learned. Midoriya was glad that Bakugo was okay, while Bakugo's mother apologized to All Might and Midoriya, saying Bakugo just worried about him. Bakugo was puzzled about the ember Midoriya mentioned, so he asked if that meant Midoriya was quirkless again, like when they were kids. Midoriya said yes, but he had never had a quirk in the first place, so he could not be too sad about it. Besides, he could not transfer it without his own will. He explained that his time with One for All had given him a glimpse of the most amazing dream. Meanwhile, Bakugo recalled how he used to berate Midoriya about how he got his quirk. He remembered when Midoriya told him he would rise even higher because he needed to keep growing. Last, he remembered his last words to Midoriya during the great battle, telling him not to let him surpass him. Because of those memories, Bakugo teared up, which surprised Midoriya. Then Bakugo fully broke down, asking what he had done to Midoriya. He said he had imagined they would compete, and he would be on Midoriya's heels for the rest of their lives. Midoriya told Bakugo not to cry, because he was not like that. He added that the ember of One for All was still within him, and that being banged up had made Bakugo emotionally vulnerable. All Might joined in, and said that the two of them had grown so strong. They were so different from the day he met them. He told Midoriya that when he saw him diving into the fray, he was already a great hero to him. But now, with the way he's encouraging the world to get back on its feet, he's now a great hero to the rest of the world as well. Bakugo, meanwhile, had ensured that he stayed alive so he could say these things. He called them his pair of great heroes and thanked them. The two shed tears of joy, while we see Todoroki and someone having scales removed. Meanwhile, Uraraka held her stomach while looking out the window. Midoriya said that when he was a child, he thought that once a big battle was won, peace would simply be restored to the world. However, their tale did not end there. It can't. The fight might be over, but until they led the way to a bright future, they needed to go further beyond. Further in the future, a scarred and partially head-shaven Midoriya returned to UA with his classmates. When Midoriya returns to UA, a graduation ceremony is underway for the batch of Mirio, Neijire, and Tamaki. The principal hands Tamaki his diploma and congratulates him on surviving a fine fight. Even so, Tamaki only says those were just potatoes. Meanwhile, Neijire is proud of her diploma because she has graduated. Her schoolmates cheer her, but they say they are sad that she is leaving. Then DJ Present Mike starts the music and apologizes to the students because their graduation was delayed. The cherry blossoms have already fallen, but at least they will receive a glorious, flowery send-off. Present Mike plays loud rave music and tells the students to make noise. The graduates are used to that event, and the new third years, the former second years, are getting used to it, while the new second years, the former first years, are taken aback because they feel Present Mike's groove does not really fit a graduation. It is already June when the UA High students graduate, and Shiro says he thought they would all be crying, while Kirishima says that graduation feels like a festival. Then Tamaki asks Neijire whether he can still feel her injuries. Neijire answers that she still feels them, but somehow she still feels on top of the world, which is weird. Tamaki says that is because of Mirio, because Mirio kept watch over them when they were down for the count inside the flying tomb. We then learn that the requests to foreign countries for essential resources and provisions, the budgeting and fundraising for the overall restoration plan, the deployment and allocation of aid, securing hospital beds and medical treatment, and also for their superhuman society, are all moving. The rapid recovery effort is made possible only thanks to behind-the-scenes maneuvering and the spurring of foreign nations by Principal Nizuwa, a VIP of global renown. The principal's major contributions to quirk morality education are the reason he became a man of global renown. All along, he has been looking ahead to what would happen after the battle. Back at the event, Present Mike says the lyrics performed were sick, a sick farewell address. So the graduates are told to clap for Maeda Fuwa, their underclassman representative. Then, for the clap back, the representative would be from the graduating class, Mirio Togata, also known as Lemillion. Because of that, a woman asks whether it is like a rap battle, so someone says that is bizarre. Another person quietly says Mirio should drop some bars. Mirio thanks everyone first, from the bottom of his heart, for coming that day even though they are busy. Because of that, someone is surprised that there is no stupid gag. Mirio adds that collectively they have lost so much and gained almost nothing. The fact is that the heroes are fighting to return to square one of a negative situation. Each course leveraged the experience they gained at that institution to come together as one and fight the good fight. Even so, they are not at square one just yet. Their 3 years at UA will be put toward that purpose, and that day is not the goal. A world without smiles and humor has no bright future, so they wish for a positive world where people can live happily. That is the finish line they are looking toward. Because of that, his schoolmates are proud of him. Then he snaps his fingers and tells Night Eye to watch him. He vanishes from the stage while saying that today marks the start of that journey for one. So to all who have yet to graduate, I say peace out. At the same time, Bibamai Karanzaki unleashes her giant robot into the crowd, and we learn that is more or less traditional for UA graduations. In the next scene, we go to the temporary classroom of Class 2A, formerly Class 1A. Eraserhead is there and says that typically a class does not have the same homeroom teacher 2 years in a row, but given their circumstances, it looks like they are stuck with him for one more year. The whole class is delighted. Mina even says that they are so happy they got Aizawa that they want nothing else. Because of that, Asui mentions that Mina is crying tears of joy. Bakugo says the dust has truly settled, while Shiro asks him if he should still be in the hospital. Bakugo answers that the doctors only told him to be careful and that it would be wrong if they were not complete on that day. So Shiro should take back what he said, and Shiro replies that is weirdly sensible coming from Bakugo. Someone then reminds Bakugo to take it easy. Then Eraserhead calls for everyone's attention and brings someone in. Aoyama arrives and once again says goodbye to his classmates because he is leaving UA. Jiro asks if he has no change of heart, while Kirishima insists they could not have separated All for One from his goons if not for Aoyama. Aoyama says that is true and that Eraserhead and Tsukuchi even said he could remain enrolled, but he needs to set things right. His very matriculation became part of All for One's scheme, so he does not deserve a graduation like the one they attended that day. He will take responsibility for what he did and once more walk the path of a hero. That sits well with him. After all, he reached out to all of them and took their hands in his. At one moment we see a flashback when he took Midoriya's offered hand, and Midoriya remembers it. Then Aoyama tells his classmates that one day, he promises, he will be worthy to stand beside them with his head held high. His classmates are touched and call him a dude among dudes. While he performs a little light show with his lasers, he tells them not to cry and that there should be no melancholy on his behalf. Class 2A is illuminated, and the control is even tighter than during the school festival. Aoyama adds that there is a surprise. A new member of Class A, Shinso. The class is surprised to see Shinso there, because the transfer worked out and Shinso obtained his provisional license. Aoyama looks a little sad and asks whether they will discuss a farewell party. His classmates agree, while Hagakure complains about Aoyama's lasers. Mineta is shocked because he sees Hagakure's face appear when her quirk bugs out due to Aoyama. Mineta calls her a cutie, while Aoyama apologizes. He gushes that all this time Hagakure is a goddess among them. But before he can finish, Eraserhead silences him. He says they still have more business to go over. Mwata Fuwa, a new third year in the hero course, enters and says that for the time being the second and third years in the hero course will join the greater restoration effort, and she is in charge of organizing them. Beyond ongoing restoration projects, they will be involved in a nationwide effort to maintain law and order. They have already moved past All Might's retirement and the war at Jakku. They should know that after each battle that winds up in textbooks, there is surely a period of chaos that does not show up in the books. Todoroki says that when there is no symbol of peace, that is when All for One was born during chaos like that. Fuwa asks Eraserhead, whom she calls Era-sensei, if what she said is right. Eraserhead answers that it is, while Ojiro is startled at how Fuwa addresses Eraserhead. Fuwa says she used to be part of Era-sensei's class, and it looks like Era-sensei does not expel Class A, so she is jealous. She adds that Eraserhead gave those pampered kids a taste of death, which was terrifying. Because of that, Eraserhead dismisses her. As she leaves, Fuwa says they should thank Era-sensei for making them realize why they need to be heroes. Eraserhead answers with "You are welcome," while Midoriya thinks about Fuwa's words. After that, Class 2A talks about the new first years, because starting tomorrow they will be senpai. Someone says time flies, while Ida says they will surely be busy. Zero says at least they got some rest, referring to Uraraka's speech, so Uraraka tells him to stop teasing. "Do not be like that," Uraraka adds, but Zero argues that he thinks her speech was amazing. Midoriya joins the talk and Uraraka asks if he got an undercut because of his injuries. Hopefully, it grows back soon, she even says. Sato says, speaking of makeovers, how is Tokoyami, who says his hair is not a fashion statement, though he does not hate it. Uraraka laughs, while Midoriya just stares. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a person with scissors, with stitches all over his body, cuts something from his own flesh. The person seems to be in pain, while continuing to travel through Japan's ruined regions. Back in Class 2A, someone asks Todoroki if he can attend the farewell party. Todoroki says he can, as long as it is not that day. Midoriya is about to say something to Todoroki, but Todoroki cuts him off and says he is fine. He has prepared himself, and at the same time Endeavor faces Dabi. In the next scene, Fuyumi tells Shoto he does not need to come. Rei then arrives and tells Fuyumi the same goes for her and for Natsuo. Fuyumi tries to talk, but before she can start, Endeavor says the same goes for Rei as well. Shoto asks if they are there out of a sense of duty. Then a guard says Dabi can speak, but only for a few minutes each day. Shoto looks and sees his older brother, with a body that is burnt all over and hardly recognizable, while a warning is added that Toya Todoroki, also called Dabi, is on a slow march toward death. Toya notices his whole family there, laughs sarcastically, and says he is not some damn tourist attraction. He coughs after saying that, and their mother is about to speak to him, but Endeavor cuts in and says they are there to tell him what will happen next. He reports that he will retire from hero work, which was always his plan once the war ended. Even so, right now he can hardly stand on his own. The hero called Endeavor is dead and burned out. Toya's flames are fiercer than any he has ever fought, he even says. Toya mockingly asks if that is so and even offers his condolences. He also says Endeavor should stop playing nice now that the war is over and calls his father a freaking coward. Endeavor agrees and says that is a fair point and that Toya knows him too well. After all, Toya kept a close eye on him. Toya gives no answer, and Endeavor adds that what Toya wanted was for him to watch, but he did not. People can say whatever they want, but the truth is that his hell flame is inside Toya. Day after day, he has watched Toya denounce him. So from that point on, he will go there every day to talk to Toya. Toya's heartbeat quickens when he hears that, and Endeavor says he has realized it is far too late, but they should talk. He calls Rei, Natsuo, and Fuyumi and tells them to use the time Shoto secured for them. At the same time, a guard informs them that Toya's heart rate has risen and any further strain could become dangerous. Endeavor says if Toya is angry at him, so be it. Toya should speak and tell him his grievances. Fuyumi says she also wants to talk to Toya, while Rei says there is a lot she wants to say. Because of that, Toya's heart rate keeps rising, so the guard ends the visiting time and says they can return tomorrow. Before leaving, Shoto asks if he can say something, since he has a question for Toya. He asks his older brother what his favorite food is. Toya does not answer, so the guard says it looks like he has reached his limit and that they should let him rest and come back another time. The Todoroki family is about to leave when Toya answers that his favorite food is soba. Shoto turns and says that is his favorite too. Toya then recalls their fight and how he said they were running in parallel but forever apart. Yet he emphasized that they were going to mingle whether he likes it or not. Then Toya tears up and apologizes to Shoto. Meanwhile, once the Todoroki family is outside, Natsuo says he is done. He is sorry, but nothing has changed about how he feels, and he does not want anything to do with Endeavor. Endeavor can do nothing but accept it, and Natsuo adds that he and his girlfriend are getting hitched. No marriage, and Endeavor will not be introduced to her. Endeavor apologizes and says he understands. Natsuo then asks what about Fuyumi, because didn't Fuyumi quit work? Fuyumi says she did quit, but a student's mother found her a new job and can provide support. Natsuo says honestly he thinks they have taken responsibility and have already doled out the punishment. Is that not enough? He then asks. Endeavor answers that he will make amends and apologize for his sins all his life, whether or not his family is there to see it. He will also shield his children from the fiery fallout as best he can. If there is a reason he survived, it is probably that. Natsuo says that sounds like hell, to which his father agrees and says it has been hell since he accepted Toya's offer to tango. Because of that, Natsuo says he never thought his father was a badass until that very moment. He then asks Shoto if he is going back to school, and when Shoto answers yes, Natsuo invites him to go together, and Fuyumi as well. As they are leaving, Shoto calls to their parents and says he will be fine because his classmates are there for him and he can be the person he wants to be. Rei is about to say that even in hell their child stays positive, but before she finishes, Endeavor's former sidekicks arrive to check on the family reunion, while Burnin says she is hungry. Rei then tells Endeavor that he's got people watching him, and shows him a text from Hawks who is also checking on the reunion and says Endeavor should say the word if he needs anything. Elsewhere, Hawks is speaking with Lady Nagant, and he is puzzled because release has already been approved, but Lady Nagant does not want to leave the prison. Lady Nagant says the outside world is a scary place for her. What if she is exploited again? She does not want a repeat of the past. Hawks then jokes that he had hoped to ask for help. Lady Nagant then tells the story that in the final battle, Izuku Midoriya demonstrated something to the world. Still, how will society accept it? How will things change? She said she will not leave prison until she sees how everything pans out. In the meantime, she is eating at taxpayer expense, so Hawks quips that she's acting quite the villain. Next we go to the reunion of La Brava and Gentle. A guard calms them and says they will be released because their contributions were acknowledged, so they should not let the door hit them on the way out. The two exchange compliments after hearing that. Endeavor then replies to Hawks and says he is doing fine, and if he needs anything, he will let Hawks know. As he reads, Hawks wonders how things will change and comments that Endeavor is taking the change in his life like a champ. We learn that Hawks is now the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission, so Endeavor calls him determined at such a young age. Hawks then calls Mr. Mara, and the scene shifts to another place, where someone is visiting Spinner. In the next scene, a person interviews various people about who Tamura Shigaraki really is. According to a 35-year-old office worker, Shigaraki is a terrifying fellow, so thank goodness he was defeated. A 21-year-old female student says her friend died because of the fight with Shigaraki, which makes her resentful. She says her life is totally messed up now. The woman's companion says their house was destroyed by the war. A 70-year-old housewife says she cannot help but wonder what would have happened if the heroes had defeated Shigaraki sooner. A 30-year-old restaurant owner says everyone initially thought Shigaraki was a 2-bit punk and nobody expected him to become such a threat. We then learn that although restoration is moving along at a brisk pace thanks to outpouring international support and volunteers, those efforts still have not reached some parts of the nation. Mountains of uncleared rubble show the widespread extent of the damage. Many citizens have had their lives overturned by the unprecedented wave of terrorism incited by the League of Villains. Who exactly was their leader? Was it Tamura Shigaraki? Find out in part 2 of this special report, says the reporter. At the same time, Midoriya meets Spinner. The doctor at the facility says Spinner is in the process of becoming a full-fledged Nomu because his body is unable to withstand multiple quirks such as body bulk and scale mail. Even so, thanks to great strides in Nomu research, they barely managed to halt that process before it progressed too far. Spinner says it is pretty shameless for Midoriya to come there and calls him a murderer. Midoriya answers that he did not come to deny what Spinner said. He came to deliver Tamura Shigaraki's parting words. Insulted, Spinner asks if Midoriya is here to kick him while he is down and calls him one sick puppy. Midoriya recalls Shigaraki's last words and relays them to Spinner because Spinner survived. He says that to the bitter end Shigaraki kept fighting to destroy. Spinner seems unable to believe it and asks whether Shigaraki told Midoriya to say that. Midoriya says yes and specifies that Shigaraki told him to pass the message only to Spinner. Spinner is shocked that Shigaraki wanted those words said to him and asks if the same message was given to Toga, Dabi, or Compress. Midoriya says no, only to Spinner, which surprises Spinner even more. After a brief, awkward silence, Spinner starts speaking again. He says Shigaraki was his shining hope. He says that with a smile, Shigaraki said they would destroy everything and turn Daika into a gnarly crater. Shigaraki represented him and his voice. As he speaks, his rage builds. He adds that when he was oppressed for who he was ready to give up on life. He says he is just a stinking heteromorph after all. Then his body bulk activates again. He says he decided not to keep dwelling on that crap because it hurts too much to remember. Even so, Shigaraki gave him a dream to cling to, so he dreamed of major change. He dreamed he could become somebody. Because Spinner's body bulk activates, the doctor tells Midoriya he does not need to put up with Spinner. If needed, they can subdue Spinner, but Midoriya raises his hand to signal them not to. Spinner grabs him and said that Tamura Shigaraki was his hero and that he was a gamer as well. While he was a shut-in, video games were all he had, and Shigaraki was a fan of all his favorites. He was Spinner's first real friend. Despite what Spinner says, other people view Shigaraki's destruction of the world for the heck of it as an unworthy cause. They call it a temper tantrum with no sense behind it. Then the reporter of the broadcast, who was Tamura Shigaraki, really, says that the ongoing investigation by authorities reveals that Shigaraki had quite the tragic past. A child being interviewed says that figuring out the root cause matters, but they should not turn Shigaraki's story into a sob story or sympathizers might convert to his cause all over again. A man says it needs to be said with their whole hearts, so let him say it, that Shigaraki is a piece of crap. Back in the present, Midoriya tells Spinner that Shigaraki said he needed to become a hero for the villains. The League of Villains had a special place in Shigaraki's heart, and Midoriya is sure Shigaraki felt about Spinner the way Spinner feels about him. That is why Shigaraki wanted Spinner to know he fought to destroy until the very end. Spinner thinks he got caught up in the frenzy, and at some point stopped dwelling on the idea that they had passed the point of no return. He says he is always too slow on the uptake. If he had taken one more step, he might have saved his hero and friend Shigaraki. In the broadcast conclusion, the reporter says the next Tamura Shigaraki may be out there, waiting with bated breath, so everyone needs to stay alert for the next threat. As Midoriya leaves, Spinner asks if the heroes will keep fighting, so Midoriya stops leaving. Spinner says that sooner or later he thinks everyone will forget about Shigaraki and the League of Villains. It will just become good times for them. Because of that, he says he will write a book. Midoriya is surprised to hear that, and Spinner adds that one book will be about Tamura Shigaraki, the symbol of fear, and another book about how the League of Villains lived to destroy. A book that'll stick it to the heroes forever and ever. The past does not die, and Spinner will keep Tamura Shigaraki's tale in circulation. Midoriya tells Spinner to make it a comic book, which surprises Spinner. Midoriya adds that Spinner should not worry, because he will not forget the past. Spinner seems satisfied to hear that, and says he also has a message. He tells Midoriya to tell his octopus friend to give life all he has got, and of course he means Shoji. Midoriya then meets Tsukauchi and All Might, who ask how his conversation with Spinner went. All Might also asks whether he delivered Shigaraki's message, and Midoriya says yes. Tsukauchi then updates Midoriya on his request regarding Kai Chisaki, also known as Overhaul. In another prison, Chisaki is visited by his former boss, who comments on his current condition. Chisaki was shocked that his boss had managed to awaken out of his coma. The boss cuts him off and asks whether Chisaki is referring to what his quirk did to him. Too bad for Chisaki. Support items have made great progress these days. The boss adds that he is no longer Chisaki's boss, because the gang is finished and gone. Chisaki tries to appeal, but the boss says he told him never to stray from the path of humanity, so Chisaki should look at what he got. The boss says he was always there, reaching out with a guiding hand and teaching Chisaki not to lower his head and walk the wrong path. He guesses Kurono never talked back to Chisaki and took him to task. Because of that, Chisaki sobs and apologizes over and over. Even so, the boss tells him it is too little too late because Eri deserves a lifetime of apologies from Chisaki. The boss adds that Eri will eventually forget Chisaki, but Chisaki must never forget what he did to Eri. He says make no mistake, he'll be taking Chisaki to task till the day he goes to hell. Meanwhile, Midoriya thanks Tsukauchi, saying that option is of course better than forcing Eri to relive that nightmare. Midoriya then asks what they can do to make it stop for good. Tsukauchi says it will not stop, but jokes that they could ask Hawks to drum up an army's worth of heroes. Midoriya is shocked that Hawks would have such power, but Tsukauchi says he is kidding. All Might then tells Midoriya to look sharp because frowns make people frown back. The new first years will join their lessons today, so they must not be all doom and gloom around them. Midoriya asks if won't they barely see the first years anyway, since there is not much contact between grade levels in the hero course. Even so, when Midoriya arrives at UA, he is surprised because Bakugo and Todoroki are being bombarded by first years. Some are asking for their contact info, some want selfies, some are huge fans, and some are simply thrilled to see them. The two are annoyed by the first years, so Midoriya remarks that the first years they are with are intense. The first years apologize because they said that when they saw Bakugo and Todoroki, they could not stop themselves from approaching them. One of them said he had seen the live battle against All for One, and another said the same. He said he had been a fan of Todoroki since the sports festival. Another also said the same, adding that Todoroki was the reason he chose his career path, which the others agreed with. Ida asked them to understand that their role models were also just people. He told them not to hound them and not to act like an unruly mob and frighten them. Todoroki said he was happy to talk, but only one at a time. Because of that, Ida said it takes a lot to pull Todoroki away from a conversation. Bakugo then remarked that the first years were running through the hallway, which made Ida remind them that rules exist for a reason. Furthermore, the two were still recovering in the wake of their battles, so the first years were told to let them rest and give them the repose they required. Shinso then said that he thought Bakugo would relish the adoring crowd, but Sero commented that he believed even Bakugo would get flustered by so many fans. Kaminari was obviously jealous, while Midoriya said that women kept their distance from Bakugo, so maybe he simply wasn't used to female attention, and he had known him long enough to say that. Shinso mentioned that was surprising, but for Mineta, it was not surprising at all. He said he would give Bakugo props for his heroics, but bad boys didn't deserve to get chicks. As he was saying that, Bakugo angrily shooed the first years away, which made someone agree with Mineta. Then, one of the first years called out to Midoriya and said that when he saw him fight against Tomura Shigaraki, it gave him all sorts of courage. He said he felt like he had to stand up and take action himself. He said Midoriya was super inspiring, so he thanked him and apologized for bothering him. At that moment, Midoriya remembered Spinner and felt pain, so all he could say was okay. Meanwhile, Mineta said that Midoriya and Todoroki had a pass, but that bad boys didn't deserve chicks. He said his soul would not accept that. Kirishima then said the battle was nuts, while the girls were only listening. He added that those three had been the center of that battle, so could anyone blame the kids? Uraraka was only watching with a blank expression when suddenly she felt a zing in her chest. In the staff room, Present Mike reported that the media wanted to interview Class 2A again, but Eraserhead refused. Ectoplasm said that some in Class 2A would welcome the chance for an interview, like Mineta, but Eraserhead explained that others would not welcome it, and their priorities came first. In the next scene, we shifted to a broken part of Japan, and Eraserhead said that on that day, they were on reconstruction duty. Midoriya was staring at his hero's suit, his face showing flashbacks because of that suit. Then Class 2A was greeted by Fat Gum, who was with Best Jeanist. Kirishima was delighted to work with Fat Gum, and he mentioned that Sun Eater, also known as Tamaki, was there too as his sidekick. Then Best Jeanist gave them their instructions. The entire Class 2A worked together to remove the rubble. Sato was pulling a roller, Tokoyami was using his dark shadow, Yaoyorozu was directing where to dump the debris using the disposal containers she created, and the others were helping carry items. Best Jeanist then called Bakugo quite the damaged denim, and said he should be recuperating, yet here he was. That was because Bakugo was doing light lifting, and then he noticed Edshot, calling him Pipsqueak. Edshot replied that Bakugo should not worry, because he was recovering, albeit slowly, and he already had his hands back. Bakugo asked if Edshot would return to normal, to which Edshot replied that from the outset, he intended to seize the day and triumph. Bakugo only smiled as he looked at the civilians on the side. Meanwhile, Shinso, Ojiro, Uraraka, and Mina were clearing an area using their quirks. Not long after, a man called out to Class 2A and offered them lunch. Class 2A was surprised to be served onigiri and various foods. The man explained that his property had been blown off the map during the big battle, which reminded Midoriya of his promise to restore everything, and he apologized. The man told Midoriya not to apologize because he didn't mean to hold that against the heroes. When they saw the heroes fighting the good fight, they realized they had no business sitting around moping. He said they couldn't just rely on the heroes alone, and that they were ready to step up and do their part in rebuilding. Class 2A then promised that after enjoying the awesome feast prepared for them, they would finish their job that day. The man commented that they might be short-handed to finish it that quickly. Suddenly, a bus arrived that shocked everyone, and Eraserhead pointed out that no other bus was scheduled to show up. From that bus came Cementos, who immediately apologized to Eraserhead, saying his class insisted on coming to apologize. That was exactly what Cementos's class did, saying that they hadn't considered what Bakugo and Todoroki had gone through. Kaminari then said that the first years were seriously intense. Eraserhead asked Cementos why he humored his class, and Cementos explained that their extreme remorse had reached him. Then, one man said that Class 2A had fought so hard for everyone, so now they wanted to help in return. Even though they didn't yet have their provisional licenses and were only at the beginning of their school year, they asked to be allowed to do whatever they could. Cementos instructed his students to take on minor tasks and not to get in the way of the second-year students. "Yes, sir," his students replied, while Kirishima remarked that their underclassmen were mysterious entities. Someone then mentioned that they hadn't prepared enough lunch for so many people, but the first year said it was fine since they had already eaten. The man who prepared the food said he wasn't sure how it all came together, but he believed that one turn of good, hard work inspires the next, and so on. Then Asui called out to Uraraka, saying that little by little, things were taking a positive turn, and what a relief that was. Midoriya was surprised to hear it, and Uraraka added that that was all. She said she was okay, then asked Midoriya what flavor of onigiri he liked. She was surprised that they both liked the same flavor, takena greens, since takena and umeboshi pickled plums were top-tier flavors. The two of them ate together, and once again Uraraka felt a zing in her heart. Midoriya, on the other hand, seemed to notice that Uraraka was hiding something from them. That evening, at exactly 7 p.m., UA eased up on the dormitory requirements, and those who wanted to move back home were allowed to. Someone said that Uraraka mentioned she would go home for a bit, and Asui remarked that she hadn't even read her text yet. We learned that Uraraka had gone to the mountainside in front of Troy and was gazing at the newly rebuilt cities. She recalled that during the final battle, the camera crew failed to capture the ending because they rushed to board the chopper. The cameraman had not realized the batteries had died, so no footage of the conclusion was ever recorded. Looking at the cityscape, she thought everything seemed normal again, and remembered what she had said to Midoriya and Asui earlier, that little by little, things were taking a positive turn, and what a relief it was. Unlike the other battles, the war was truly over this time, and everything had finally settled, which was good. The world was facing forward, ready to restore everything. She said she loved the fact that people were smiling again, which made her cry, and she said she didn't want to be a party pooper. Then she remembered Toga again, and said that, like before, she was going through lasting pain, shutting it all away, and then her tears poured out completely. At that moment, Midoriya arrived from behind, and called out to the crying Uraraka. In the next scene, a boy narrates that all he knew about his quirk was that it was a freak variant, unrelated to any quirk in his family's history. Out of nowhere, his mom, dad, older sister, uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa, and great-grandpa suddenly stopped being kind to him. They tied him up and locked him in the basement. He was so scared and sad that he cried and screamed, so they sewed his mouth to keep it from opening wide. He did not know how many years passed, but one day his family told him the country was doomed, gave him a bunch of water and baked goods, and he never saw them again. After some time, there was a huge crash, and something cut an opening down into the basement. Just like that, he was free to go outside. Sunlight was painful and scary because he was not used to it. Then he asked himself what he had done wrong and why he had to be so miserable. All that time he had been so frightened and sad. So why? He wondered. Were the people he saw smiling so much, as we see his face full of holes from the stitches? Meanwhile, for Uraraka, she said she loved seeing people smile, and that was the reason why she wanted to become a hero. Then she remembered Toga's last words to her, when Toga told her that she could just do the right thing like a plain old hero, yet she went above and beyond and spared a thought for her. Because of that, Uraraka thought that she had lived at the cost of Toga's life, and she blamed herself for why Toga died. At that moment, Midoriya arrived, calling out to her, leaping in with a huge jump using the remnants of his one-for-all power. Uraraka immediately covered her face in shame and asked Midoriya why he was there and how he had found her. Midoriya answered that he somehow knew she was there, so he jumped using one for all. It was because that place was where they had shared a heart-to-heart before. Uraraka replied that wasn't what she meant, and she said she was heading home for now. Midoriya said that was fine, but he had a feeling she would go there. Uraraka asked why he came, and she was about to say that she doesn't want to be seen right now. However, Midoriya cut her off, apologizing, saying he just wanted her to show him what she was going through, because she has always been this way, even back during the entrance exam. He reminded her of their first meeting, when she gave him points to help him pass the UA exam, and when she said his name, Deku shouted, "Do your best," which was why she liked it. All along, without fail, Uraraka had prioritized others over herself. That included the sports festival and countless other times. Since way back, she had saved him every step of the way, which was why he called her his hero. Hearing that, Uraraka couldn't hold back her tears and broke down crying in front of Midoriya. Midoriya added that because she was his hero, he couldn't take her strength for granted. Then, he offered her his hand, saying sometimes holding one hand could be enough to soothe pain. He asked who would protect the heroes when they needed protecting. Uraraka held Midoriya's hand and said it was her fault Toga died. If only she hadn't been stabbed. If only her head hadn't been so full of pointless thoughts. It was because Toga's quirk allowed her to share her blood with others, and it shouldn't have ended that way. She thought she might have found another way. If only she had figured Toga out sooner, and maybe things would have turned out differently if they had known each other as children. Midoriya said he understood, because the same weight pressed on him about Tenko, but he corrected himself and said he meant Tamura Shigaraki. He was told he couldn't tackle that battle in the same way as all the others. All for One himself had said it, that the path he chose was a thorny one. Even so, he knew that if they kept going above and beyond, reaching out even when no one asked them to, they could make a difference. To their surprise, the rest of Class 2A arrived. They said they were there for Uraraka too, and Asui called her silly head. Asui said she had been waiting for Uraraka to open up to her, and he knew she could tell her whatever was on her mind. Meanwhile, Midoriya remembered how he had completed One for All, and he was glad for what he had done. Then Bakugo asked how the ember was, since Midoriya had used a huge burst to get there, but Midoriya said the ember was fine. Their classmates were shocked to hear it, while Eraserhead listened, as they asked why Midoriya hadn't told them. Class 2A was stunned to learn One for All was gone from Midoriya, since he had fully completed it. That amalgamation of power, woven together by courage and heroism. Going forward, he said he'd be okay as long as everyone contributed to the weaving. After that, Class 2A celebrated Aoyama's departure, with Eri even singing a song. They all rejoiced together, sending off their friend. Elsewhere, Hawks and All Might were discussing the broadening scope of the Billboard chart, and Hawks said it was part of his plan, but only once the country was back on its feet. Clearly, many people beyond just the pro heroes had played a huge role in the war. That was why they would also give recognition to heroes in the original sense of the word, not just to currently employed, professional, capital H heroes. All Might said he thought Hawks might want to lean away from the whole popularity contest altogether. Hawks replied that it made sense if All Might only saw the flaws in the system and not the benefits. But what he meant was an update that didn't throw everything away. Because the even greatest of all time could only do so much. And if they hoped to save more people, their saviors had to include more than just the pros. All Might said he understood, hoping to cultivate any number of great heroes, and Hawks agreed. Then we moved to a child with a strange quirk, being stared at by people. He asked why it was just him, and why he had to suffer, as his quirk starts to manifest. At that moment, an old woman approached and held his hand. The child was surprised, and so was the old woman when she saw his face. She remembered Tenko's face, filling her with horror. She wondered whether any hero had helped Tenko after she walked away. Now and then, she still couldn't sleep thinking about it. Hawks then said that day, Izuku Midoriya had shown society the need to support each other. Midoriya had taught them that sitting back and doing nothing was not an option. Hawks said he knew Midoriya's message had struck home, and he bet that someday soon, heroes would finally have the time to breathe. It had already come true, as the old woman assured the child he would be okay because she was there, which made him cry. Midoriya and Uraraka saw the interaction, and when Ida asked if the two of them were all right, the two just smiled. A few years into the future, Midoriya narrated that people are not born equal. They take shape differently, which leads them to care about others. That is because one's mind and body are unlike anyone else's, drawn to others in search of common ground. That, he said, was the truth about society, something he learned at age 17. At that time, he was inside the staff room, writing those words inside a book. Then, a grown-up Kota called him, addressing him as Deku-sensei, and asked where they would meet for the practical exercise that afternoon. Midoriya told Kota at the bus stop, because that too would be a lesson on how to reach the USJ. Midoriya added in his book that there is no denying that on the day he learned the truth about society, he felt the support, hopes, and prayers of everyone. Even now, those voices continue to encourage him. He said that if a single sparing thought for another person was the first step toward herodom, then on that day, everyone was a great hero. He was hardly cut out for the dream he once held, but it came true for him, and the tale that began the moment his body moved before his mind could think was now coming to an end along with the ember of One for All. In that case, why was he writing it still, he asked, and answered that it was because there were more pages yet to come. 8 years later, after the conclusion of the final battle, in a middle school, a teacher told his students that high school was just around the corner. They would fill out and turn in their career goal forms by next week. One student said that it had to be UA's hero course for him. Another student said that support items were all the rage these days, and he wanted to get hired at Lightly Labs, the design agency where the brainiac, Hatsume, worked. Another student said he would follow in the footsteps of Dr. Ryu Yoshida and become a physician capable of curing the incurable. That, he said, could be expected. A wolf-looking girl student said she wanted to join Gel Inc., which went down in history during the cyber war 5 years back. That was La Brava's company, and the girl added that the girl bosses who could code were simply too awesome. Then, one student mocked another with polka-dot hair who also wanted to join the hero track. The bully said it would be difficult given the quirk of the polka-dot student named Dai. Dai responded that no one could know whether he could or could not do it. Another student mentioned that at that time, the villain emergence rate was on the downturn, which meant the number of pro heroes was being cut back. They were now facing an era where only the uber-powerful could become heroes. In the next scene, middle school classes ended, and Dai thought that everyone really had changed. When they were children, each one of them was nuts about All Might, Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Deku, Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite, and Shoto. They all wanted to be like those heroes. Dai admitted that he alone had not grown up, so whenever he felt unsure of himself, he would always go to All Might's statue, remembering how excited he was when asked if he was ready to try his best as a first year, and he answered yes. Now as a teacher at UA, Midoriya watched the news about Shoji receiving the Imamura Peace Prize Award. That was due to his remarkable work as a hero since his debut. He had devoted his efforts to finding peaceful resolutions to conflicts surrounding discrimination based on body type, a concern still present in rural areas, and the award was recognition of his achievements and influence. Shoji said he dedicated the honor to those who joined the uprising 8 years ago. All he had done, he said, was stand on the firm resolve they had demonstrated to the world, and nothing more. Then, Midoriya saw on Team Up News that Ingenium, Froppy, Creati, and Uravity were touring elementary schools nationwide. In recent times, they had observed a decline in villain emergence and a broadening of heroes' roles in society. Part of that expansion was a plan spearheaded by Uravity to provide access to court counseling, considered the most essential initiative of the present day. One of the elementary students helped by them was Eri, along with her classmates. Then, Eraserhead showed Midoriya a video of Bakugo, because Bakugo was about to drop again in the Billboard chart. In that video, Bakugo shouted at a person filming him up close and even threatened to kill him. Midoriya asked if Eraserhead was cleaning up Bakugo's act, and Eraserhead replied that Todoroki was going to take the lead now. Midoriya said that was because Todoroki had been doing good deeds day and night. Though awkward, he treated his fans equally with respect, and these days, fewer and fewer people thought of him as Endeavor's son. Then, Midoriya asked if Eraserhead knew how Mirio skyrocketed up the chart, surpassing Kimui Woods and Mount Lady. Now, Monoma and Hononuki were matching that energy and rising fast. Just the other day, Mirio had joked that he was quaking in his boots. Then, Eraserhead asked if Midoriya missed hero work. Midoriya replied that back when Eraserhead and Fuwa Senpai were talking all those years ago, a thought had occurred to him. He realized that even if he were quirkless again, as long as he could use his experiences to help others, there was something kind of awesome about that. He asked if he was pretty awesome, but Eraserhead told him to be stricter with his students, because that mattered. He explained that these days, the types of kids getting into UA to learn from them were basically being handed golden tickets to become future heroes. They needed to be tough and to keep the kids humble so they would not grow arrogant. Eraserhead asked if Midoriya understood, but Midoriya argued that Eraserhead had always been kind to them. In the next scene, Midoriya left, saying that ever since they had started working, their schedules had not lined up, so he and his classmates had not been able to plan get-togethers. While walking around the city, he saw posters and billboards of his classmates like Tokoyami and Kirishima, who were absurdly popular among the male demographic. He also saw children playing and pretending to be Kirishima. He said that he enjoyed seeing everyone's success, and when he thought back to their school days, he always went to All Might's statue. Then, he saw one of the children fall, and instinctively he leapt into action to catch him. He was surprised to see another person also leap into action to save the child. The child thanked Midoriya, while the other rescuer was shocked to realize that the one before him was none other than Izuku Midoriya. That rescuer was Dai, who immediately went into fanboy mode because of it. And Midoriya even asked him if he was about to enter high school. Dai said that people were saying times were changing fast and in big ways, and that kids like him could not keep up because his quirk was super wimpy compared to his classmates. That, he said, was why he always visited All Might's statue to ask if he could be a hero like Midoriya. Midoriya was surprised to hear that and smiled, remembering that it was the very same question he had once asked All Might. Then, Midoriya began analyzing Dai's quirk. Dai could throw saucer-like objects from his head, a hair-based quirk. Taking a cue from Mineta, that quirk was workable, stackable for boosted strength, and maybe even adjustable in size. Midoriya even commented that it seemed quite versatile. That creeped Dai out, but it was also encouraging at the same time. Midoriya told Dai he would be fine, because after all, had he not just now made the effort to reach out with a helping hand? He said Dai could be a hero and urged him to do his best. Then, Midoriya thought that ever since his dream had come true, it had become his turn to plant dreams in others. Beyond that, he admitted he would be lying if he claimed he did not miss hero work, but as long as he could inspire and encourage others, he would call that story still the tale of how they became great heroes. And so, the story of My Hero Academia came to an end, or did it? All Might grabbed the end symbol and crushed it, telling Midoriya he was late. Midoriya replied that he would meet All Might at the airport if he only knew. All Might said he had a surprise for him, and when asked if it was a wall scroll, All Might said that the data obtained between the battle of him and All for 8 years ago had apparently opened up all sorts of exciting possibilities. Just as quirks themselves grew and deepened, so did technology. So his gift to Midoriya was a super suit. All Might added that Midoriya had mastered the use of multiple quirks at once, so he wanted him out there to provide even more data for them. Midoriya tried to refuse, saying it must have been so expensive, but All Might explained that his overseas friend and Hatsume had come together to build the suit, and the project had been funded by Midoriya's old chums from Class A, led by Bakugo. All Might told Midoriya not to suppress his urge to return to hero work, because did his body not always leap into action? He told Midoriya to take his words to heart, because he had earned that power fair and square. Midoriya teared up and smiled with joy. Then, Hawks wondered about there being more time to kill than ever, because just then, traffic was backed up due to a landslide on Warstar Road, so he requested any heroes available to respond. At that moment, Midoriya saw the ghost of Shigaraki, and Bakugo called him, as the whole class rushed toward the landslide site. This is the tale of how they would keep reaching out to help, for all time. In the next scene, Uraraka found herself in an open field with a single tree. She saw birds flying above her, and wondered where she was because she still needed to organize all the papers. Then her eyes suddenly widened in shock, because Toga Himiko appeared in front of her. She did not know what to say to her, who simply greeted her. After that, she woke up and wondered if it had just been a dream. Later that day, she greeted the 3 heroes who would be with them for the day, saying she was sure everyone would like it. The 3 heroes she greeted were the Big 3, Lemillion, also known as Mirio, Neijire-chan, also known as Neijire, and Sun Eater, also known as Tamaki. Mirio asked whether the kids even cared about someone like him. Neijire asked why he would say that, and said how curious that was. Tamaki said it was an honor to help with Uravity's quirk counseling. Mirio then praised Ryukyu's agency, and we learned he was the #1 hero at HBJ. Neijire said they had begun training newcomers, and revealed that she was now the #7 hero at HBJ. Then Tamaki, Fat Gum's sidekick, asked if that was since then. Uraraka said she supposed the Big 3 had looked over the school records of the students, but she wanted to stress that the most important thing was communication. It was revealed that she was now the #24 hero at HBJ. She added that even children who seemed fine probably experienced problems, whether big or small. Most of them had things they were going through in their own environments, and very few children could open up to unknown adults right away. But over time, she was sure they would begin to see the signs, so there was no need to keep checking the papers over and over. The average time, she said, was 1 month, but that could change depending on the case. They should focus on making friends, no matter how many. Tamaki said that must be tiring for Uraraka. Uraraka answered that it was not tiring because she received help from many people. Everyone, she said, played their part masterfully, like hawks who continually negotiated with the Ministry of Education and requested aid for specific areas, which greatly improved quirk education. Tamaki asked if that meant Uraraka had some free time, but based on her reaction, that was not the case. Then the students arrived, excited to see the big three, as well as Uravity and Froppy. Mirio called them over, and they asked him to do the thing. So, Mirio climbed the tree, bared his butt, which he called Peaches, and told the kids to try to grab them. Nejire called it weird, while Mirio kept telling the kids to try to take his peaches using their quirks. The kids did exactly that, but one nervous kid wearing a minor hat did not join in. Uraraka helped him by using her zero-gravity quirk. At the same time, Mirio teased the kids that they would not get the peaches because they were all his. He said they needed to buy them from the grocery store. To his surprise, he was struck by the child whom Uraraka had helped. Because of that, Mirio immediately came down from the tree and said that the last person who had managed to grab one of his peaches had been the thieving shogun last year. We learned the child Uraraka helped was named Ushima. Mirio hugged him, shouting that it was peach season, so the other kids cheered for him too. Praise poured in for Ushima, with some saying he was already a peach farmer and others saying they were jealous. Uraraka said, "Not gonna lie, she had a lot to do and many responsibilities, because after all she was continuing a pre-existing project. Even so, she wanted to see people happy, so she worked with what she loved." Nejire asked if that was not like Tamaki, who said he was very naive. He had no hole to crawl into, so he dug one himself. Uraraka added that Asui was always with her at work and she still saw her friends, so her me time was all the time. We then learned that Froppy, also known as Asui, was now the number 34 hero at HBJ. A little later that night, Uraraka and Asui were riding the train home. Asui asked if Toga Himiko had been appearing again in Uraraka's dreams. Uraraka said yes, and that it had started a month ago, but she could not remember what was happening in the dreams. Because of that, she asked whether it could be that she was under too much pressure without even noticing it. She had even gone for a checkup, but the doctor told her they had found nothing wrong and said she was probably just tired. Asui said she still needed a second opinion and to stop accepting everything others said and keeping things to herself. Uraraka answered that that was what she was trying to do and that the doctor had been Asui's idea. Then Uraraka asked whether Himiko was trying to tell her something. That day, she said Himiko's blood had saved her. Himiko had died because of it, and her blood should have been gone. Even so, what if Himiko's blood had mixed with hers and was living inside her, just like One for All? Because of that, Asui told her to remember what was happening in her dreams. Elsewhere, Midoriya, Bakugo, and Kirishima were in a car together. Bakugo asked why he had to give Midoriya a ride, and Midoriya thanked him. Kirishima said Bakugo himself had suggested it because he was very proud of his new car. Midoriya commented that the car was amazing because the seats sank, while Bakugo said he only took the two of them because Kirishima had threatened to scratch the hood with hardening if he did not drive them. Kirishima then mockingly asked since when the great dynamite got rattled by a threat. Bakugo said Midoriya did not even need a ride, so he should have said no. Midoriya answered that Bakugo was right, but he had managed to finish the report on the students' quirk training, so he was thankful. Then Kirishima asked whether any of Midoriya's students matched his style, and while saying that he kept eating. Because of that, Bakugo told him that if he dropped food, he would kick him out. As Midoriya continued to sink into Bakugo's back seat, he asked if Kirishima was looking for sidekicks. We learned he was now the number 12 hero at HBJ, and he said yes. He had only just begun his solo career. He still received a lot of help from Fat Gum and Amajiki. But to quote Fat Gum, there are things you only find when you are looking after other people. At that time, Fat Gum was the number 11 hero at HBJ. Kirishima added that it was true, because Ida and Yamamo were in a league of their own, and many of their friends had started their solo careers before he did, so he thought everyone was cool. Midoriya said Bakugo had received many sidekick applications, but they ended up with the sidekicks crying and giving up. Bakugo said they were not talking about that, and we learned that he had started as the 4th hero at HBJ, but had dropped to 15th. Kirishima said many had applied to Bakugo because they were impressed by his fight with All for One and had signed up to be his sidekicks with high expectations. Deku said Bakugo's bad manners had ruined all those expectations right from the interview. Because of that, Bakugo said he's kicking them out. Then he said if anyone had said they wanted to surpass him, he would accept them right away. While he said that, Midoriya saw his All Might card, signed by All Might himself. Bakugo asked if Midoriya would continue teaching, and Midoriya immediately said yes. He said he collected data for the armor on days when he was not teaching, like Aizawa-sensei back in the day. He also said several schools had invited him to give lectures and seminars, so he had the opportunity to share his experiences with younger ones almost every day. The armor made him very happy, he said, but his feelings had not changed. He thought he would enjoy being a teacher even if he still had one for all. He loved his work, and now that he was with his classmates again, he was very happy, and he thanked Bakugo and Kirishima. Bakugo replied, "I see," while Kirishima teased him that Midoriya had turned down his offer. Midoriya wondered at that. So Kirishima explained that Bakugo had invited him to work at his agency. Midoriya said that was not going to happen, and Bakugo said he got it, while Kirishima said Midoriya was a bit slow with those things. Then Bakugo said seriously, maybe he was not the best person to say it to Midoriya, but he thought it was about time for him to think more highly of himself, otherwise he would not notice even the most obvious things. Midoriya answered that Bakugo was one to talk. Bakugo said that giving special treatment to everyone meant there was nothing truly special to Midoriya. Midoriya was almost fully swallowed by Bakugo's back seat and did not get what he meant, while Kirishima asked why the back seat was like that. They soon arrived at their destination, where the whole Class A was gathering to celebrate the fact that Shoto Todoroki, former 1A student, was now second place on the Billboard chart. Todoroki apologized for calling them together that night, but Kaminari told him not to worry because they had only used his climb to number 2 as an excuse. We learned that Kaminari was the number 44 hero at HBJ, his first placement. Todoroki looked saddened by what Kaminari said, so Kaminari told him he was joking and of course they wanted to celebrate. Then Sero tattled to the rest of the class about what Kaminari had done to Todoroki, so Kaminari told him to stop. The number 13 hero at HBJ, Ida, told Sero that Kaminari was correct. Any rise in the rankings was noteworthy, and because the ranking criteria had become more complex and fragmented, they should not take them at face value anymore. With him were the number 19 hero Yaoyorozu and the number 9 hero Shoji. Then Sero and Kaminari said the three of them were the noteworthy ones. Mineta said their words were hurtful and that they should be careful with what they said, and we learned he was the 108th hero, that being his first placement. Jiro told him 108 was a good ranking for him, and she was the number 30 hero. Not far from Jiro's ranking was Mina as the number 28 hero. Meanwhile, Kota said everyone with a solo career was amazing, while Shinso said he could not understand why people crave the spotlight, and Hagakure agreed. At that time, Kota was a sidekick in Tentacle's agency, also known as Shoji. Shinso was unranked, while Hagakure was the number 39 hero. Sato said it was crazy they had all managed to come that night, and that the last time they had seen each other had been just the other day. He was a sidekick in Wash's agency, while Ojiro was the number 32 hero, saying that was because the number of villains kept decreasing every year. Tokoyami said villains would not disappear, but at least they would lose strength, and Aoyama agreed. Tokoyami added that the heroes who kept fighting were living proof of that. We learned that he was the number 17 hero, while Aoyama was a sidekick in Invisible Girl's agency, also known as Hagakure. Tokoyami also said that now it was their turn, and that at the end of the road, they would no longer be needed. Heroes, he said, were slowly heading toward extinction. As he said that, various heroes and their ranks were shown. Mirko was ranked 6, Best Jeanist was 5, Gang Orca was 21, Kenny Woods was 4, Mount Lady was 8, Death Arms was 42, Ryukyu was not far behind at 45, while Present Mike was number 40. Shindo was number 20, Honanuki was 14, Monoma was 10, Kendo was 23, Tetsu was 26, Setsuna was 22, Fukudashi was 33, Yurashi was 16, and Shishikura was 41. Tokoyami added he did not want to advertise the company he was advertising, Because what did making you even more fabulous even mean, since he was darkness itself? Sato asked if the drink he held was alcohol-free. Todoroki then sat beside Midoriya and said Tokoimi was right, and Midoriya agreed. Todoroki said that recently many people had been saying things to him. Bakugo asked if he was going to brag, and he said maybe. He told them people had said he fought against a cruel fate and fulfilled his duty. He had hesitated and stumbled a lot along the way, but he had no doubt that the choices he had made were correct. Still, how to put it, all that talk of duty and destiny, even though they were part of a much bigger story, he felt that his wanting to fight and end up where he was now were things that had been bound to happen. That, he said, was why he wanted to take bowl and chopstick making classes in Ishikawa, surprising Midoriya at Bakugo. Todoroki said he thought soba would taste better if he ate it with utensils he made himself. Bakugo said if that was Ishikawa, then it was probably Wajima style. Todoroki said he would do both Wajima and Yamanaka style, and it was a private class. Then he revealed that while praying at Toya's altar, he had finally realized something. He had always enjoyed eating, and realized that wanting to become a hero was not all that he was about. Because of that, Bakugo told him he had too much time, and Todoroki said that was true, now that he had time to spare in his heart. Bakugo said he must be reading Parasite. Then Midoriya was shown looking at something, before everyone was surprised, when someone shouted that Korwaro and Kinoko were dating. Hagakure said it was true, but Mina argued she had gone on a mission with the two and there had been no signs. Sero then asked what about Kaminari and Jiro, because their offices were next to each other. Jiro laughed and said they were all wrong, while Kaminari explained that they would not believe it, but he really had been worried about opening his own agency. Then he learned the building next to Jiro's was available, so he did not hesitate. Jiro said he was the worst, and added that it reminded her of their first year when they used to sit side by side. Jiro said that made her feel relaxed, while Bakugo called them lame losers. Midoriya then thought about things bound to happen, and remembered Shigaraki's last words telling him to do his best. Because of that, he wondered if there was still a part of himself that he had not discovered. Right then he froze upon seeing Uraraka. He watched her happily talk with their classmates, and it seemed he realized that she was the answer to what he had been wondering. At that moment, an alert beeped, and they all received a notification that a car had been stolen on Gariki Street in the 2nd South District. The criminal's quirk was causing a lot of damage, so there was a risk of it escalating into a major incident. Jokingly, Sero said that was why they could not drink. Then, they all suited up to head to the incident, with Midoriya wearing the suit All Might had given him. When they arrived at the scene, they immediately solved it. The police had already caught the criminal, who was apologizing, saying it had just been a sudden impulse. At the same time, Bakugo said he was the one who got there first, but Midoriya said it was Ida who told them to stop bickering. Ida added that if it had been a sudden impulse, it meant the criminal was not an evil fellow, and someone said he was glad there were no victims. Meanwhile, Kirishima said their jobs would not disappear soon, and Tokoimi agreed. Their reunion had been pretty short, but should they call it a night? Some did not want to, while others said they could get together again soon. Todoroki said he had already paid the bill, so they could go home straight away. Mina got mad because Todoroki was the reason for the celebration, so they should split the bill. Because of that, they each paid Todoroki in cash one by one. Then Bakugo told Midoriya not to stay long because he still needed to wake up early tomorrow since Edshot was returning to Japan. Midoriya said okay and thanked him. Some other classmates also wanted to tag along to see Bakugo's car. Bakugo said goodbye, so Midoriya also said goodbye, inviting Bakugo to come by as a guest teacher more often. Aizawa-sensei, he said, was planning a class on communication. Bakugo said not to use him as a bad example. Midoriya simply smiled and left, remembering what Bakugo had said, that giving special treatment to everyone meant there was nothing truly special to him. Meanwhile, Asui and Uraraka said goodbye to each other. Then Uraraka thought that tomorrow would be another day of work. She then thought of Midoriya, but they had been seated far apart that night, so she had not been able to talk to him. Even so, she said that was okay because they see each other a lot at work. Then she remembered when Midoriya had called her his hero many years ago when they were still students at UA. They discovered what they wanted and what they needed to do. They respected each other's choices and smiled together. That, she thought, was more than she could ever ask for, but she just wanted to talk to Midoriya a little bit more. She had come to love Midoriya, and as she turned, she saw him running toward her. Midoriya was happy to see Uraraka, and at that moment Uraraka suddenly remembered what Toga had told her in her dream. Uraraka was shocked, because Toga had said it was fine. She had lived exactly the way she wanted, and because she loved Uraraka so much, her wish for her was for Uraraka to live exactly as she wanted to. As she said that, she pushed Uraraka toward Midoriya, smiling broadly for Uraraka, saying she would fulfill her wish. At the same time, in the real world, Midoriya told Uraraka that he respected everyone and loved everyone. Everyone was special, he said, and he had thought it was as simple as that. But on that day, he really wanted to talk to Uraraka more. Not just that day, but from that point on too. He wanted to be with Uraraka and love her. Uraraka was surprised to hear it, because it had been a month since she had been seeing Midoriya more often. Midoriya asked what Uraraka had to say, and she could not answer because she was so giddy. Even so, a moment later she said they were thinking the same thing, so they held hands, and that was where the story of My Hero Academia truly ended. Thank you so much for experiencing this story with me. Until the next one.